Hello, and welcome to Great Train Layouts Live. I'm your host, Nick Ozrak, and I'm delighted to join you this evening to talk about the East Broad Top. This is something where I suppose I'm surprised at myself in a way for taking this long to get to such a subject, but it is great to have you join us tonight to talk about such an amazing real life railroad and how the heck do you take this real life amazing railroad and translate it into a train layout? Because as a fan of the EBT for 7 years since I was reintroduced to it, it's always been something that I've admired, and I've come to learn a lot about the real thing. I've come to learn a lot about different approaches that modelers take to representing it in train layout form. And so that's what we're going to be doing tonight, is trying to answer the question, what is an approach? How do you take a railroad like the East Broad Top, especially when so much of the real thing still exists, and encapsulate that in a layout? Because there's so much to that wonderful railroad. But I'm looking forward to doing that with you tonight. I see the chat is active. Good to see some familiar faces. Hi, John, Dylan, Rich, Rusty Rails, and Millennial Modeler. I feel like I tongue twist that one every time. So, but first, some housekeeping out of the way. Great to have you along as... if I don't splash myself with my own water. Great to have you along for the ride as always, and encourage you to participate in the conversation either in the chat if you're watching this live, or comment below with your thoughts on how you are enjoying the show in general. Tonight, what we're going to be doing over the course of the next few hours is we're going to be, this is a track plan that I've designed in part. Part of it was inspired by another layout, which I'll talk about, and part of it is just what is there. And my approach to trying to take this thing and replicate it in HON3 in a roughly 14 foot by 22 foot area. And so that is what we'll be doing. We'll be building this layout over the next couple of hours, and then we'll have a little bit of playtime where we actually get to see how well the design works in terms of playing with it. Want to thank tonight's sponsor, Bantam Model Works. You could go to bantammodelworks.com and see some of their amazing craftsman kits, including the East Broad Top Pattern / Foundry. And we'll be taking a look at that building when we talk about the shops in a moment. And they just recently announced the electrical shops. So you can have a little piece of Orbisonia on your model railroad, even if you're not modeling the East Broad Top. You can still get it for HO scale. Link is in the description. And I also want to thank my man Heiss, aka Mark Huber, for supplying the music for tonight's live stream. Hi, Colin. Good to see you. Hey, Casey. A lot of familiar faces. So let us dive into it. And first off, okay. So guys know that I like to build these things alongside with you. And as you can see, there's a lot that we haven't done yet. But I did get a head start on building the shops because I needed to make sure that everything fit test right. I needed to make sure everything worked. And by the time I'd done that, I thought this is going to take up too much time during the stream. And so I just built it. So apologies if you were hoping to see the unfolding of the shops, but we're going to talk about the shops in a great deal. So let's talk about the plan a bit and what I chose to go with. Because if you're not familiar with the East Broad Top, quick backstory. The East Broad Top is a 30-mile coal hauling railroad that was built in central Pennsylvania in 1872 and completed in 1874. Survived until 1956, hauling coal, iron, ganister, which is a type of rock used in the manufacture of brick for industrial furnaces. 56, it shuts down, bought by a scrap dealer named Nick Kowalczyk, who turned it into a tourist railroad. It ran until 2011. There was a hiatus, and then in 2020, A new group took ownership of the railroad and brought it back into operation. And just this year in 2023, brought a steam locomotive back into operation. So incredible that this railway, so much of this railroad has survived, including its legendary shop complex. So you have the challenge when you're modeling something like the East Broad Top. There's a number of challenges that face you. Number one is the gauge. We are narrow gauge. We are 3-foot narrow gauge, which means if we are doing it as an actual narrow gauge railroad, which we will be tonight, then that means narrow gauge models. Now, 3-foot narrow gauge in HO is called HON3. HON3 it's a good scale, but it requires a lot of patience with scratch building because there's so much that you have to build, especially when it comes to rolling stock. It can be a bit expensive with these brought up as well because the only steam locomotives that have been produced are brass. So they tend to fetch a pretty penny because they were produced in brass 40 years ago and haven't been run since. So there are challenges. So I should say that while we are modeling this in HON3, there's no reason that you couldn't do this in HO scale. In fact, Bachmann has recently announced an East Broad Top number 10, which is a straight HO, not narrow gauge model. And so this is a track plan that could work in HO. Because if you don't want to get into HON3, I totally understand it. But I think that you could still get the feel of this railroad even if you have to go standard gauge. Obviously, narrow gauge is what it is, but sometimes frugality wins the day. So that's one challenge that faces you if you're going to model it. The other is, and this is something that comes to mind with just about any railroad, but it's particularly prevalent in areas. How do you encapsulate what the East Broad Top is? Well, and let's use some props to talk about this challenge as well, because I've got research material. Folks know that I love the East Broad Top. I established the Fans of the East Broad Top Facebook group, for example, which now has, I think it's crested 8,000 members. It's doing very well for itself. But in terms of research, how much do I love the East Broad Top? Besides establishing the fan group, I have tracks around Mount Union. Thank you to Garbly Publishing Company for this one. I should probably put them on my lap. I have East Broad Top Railroad by Kenneth Sprainirth. I have Colorful East Broad Top by Mallory Hope Farrell. I have East Broad Top to the Mines and Back by Ross Grenard and Frederick Kramer. Photos by a mixture of folks, including the famous Philip Hastings. There's a photo in this that I particularly love that I have to see if I can find that really quickly, because to me, this one photo kind of encapsulates what the railroad is about. And here we are. I'll try to hold that for you to see as best as I can. This is a shot at Orba-Sonia Station looking towards the shops. This, to me, is what the EBT is about, because you can still see this exact scene today. We've got East Broad Top, Slim Gauge Survivor by Dean Melander. We've got Along the East Broad Top by Donald Heimberger. And, of course, the granddaddy of them all, East Broad Top by Rainey and Kuiper. If you're going to do a railroad, having the right research material is worthwhile. And so that's what we've got to work with. On top of that, there's a great website called oldeasty.com, which has some photos, a lot of like a mile-by-mile account of the railroad. And if you own some of these books, it actually shows you what pages you can find specific photos, which will get into the scenes that we're going to delve into. So a 30-mile railroad that's inspired all these books, to say nothing of the magazines and videos and so forth. And it's for a 30-mile railroad, it's large in scope. It may not be long, it may not be large in terms of the track, but it is large in scope because there's so much to every piece of the railroad could be something that you as a modeler choose to focus on. You've got Mount Union. Well, let's start with the mines. So the mines where you'd get the coal and around the Robertsdale area were extensive. You could focus on the mines, and that could be a layout in and of itself. You could do a small layout that focuses on a single mine. You could focus on the mines as a whole system of things. That could be your focus. Then you have all of these sections of in between. You've got the branches of the railroad. You've got stations like Saltillo, which is where there was a branch that cut off to go to a Ganister quarry. You've got what we have here, the shop complex in Orbisonia. And then you have Mount Union, where, yes, it's just a simple interchange, but it's not a simple interchange because it meets with the standard gauge Pennsylvania Railroad. That yard was massive. So, unless you have a gigantic airport hangar, you're not going to be able to fit in all of these elements of what makes the EBT. So you have to kind of say, what as a modeler do I care about the most? What to me feels like the most important elements to encapsulate about this railroad? And so tonight's build is based on what that answer is for me. It may differ for you. And that's the beauty of model railroading, is that you will find the elements of railroading that speak to you. But to me, when I think of the EBT, I think of the shops. And the shops, number one. It's the thing that made me go, wow. Because when I first toured the railroad, I saw the roundhouse. And I was expecting to be cool, and the roundhouse was cool. Then I saw the shops, and I was blown away. So the shops to me are the thing that I care the most about. But I didn't want to just do the shops. You could. You could make that a module, and that'd be a perfectly satisfactory one. But it wouldn't be everything. It needs some. For me, I like my in-between scenes. I like a sense of being able to enjoy the train running. And I wanted a little bit more to do, especially in terms of having trains pass one another. So trains can meet at Orbisonia, but I wanted one other meeting location. So this is the plan that I've come up with. Buckle in your seatbelts. Here we go. Let's run through this. This is going to be our staging yard. This staging yard is going to represent both Mount Union and Robertsdale. Train comes out, and we have Alwick, I guess the G is silent, Alwick Bridge, which crosses Alwick Creek. And that is going to be our first scenic feature if you're going south. I mean, obviously, if you're going north, you cross the same bridge too, but this is on the northern end of the railroad. As you could tell, I didn't initially put it in here, but after I imported it to trains, I thought, this is a good place for this scene. It doesn't take up that much extra space. So, Alwick Creek, we'll get back to what this Y is. This is a Y that allows us to either head south or north, depending on what we're modeling directionally. We're going to get back to that. We're following the railroad from north to south. So Mount Union staging, crossing Alwick Creek, then passing through the shops of Orbisonia, Rock Hill Furnace. Round this curve, then we cross Pogue Bridge, which, another legendary scene. It felt right to have this bridge in here as far as a nice in-between scene. This lawn area is going to be Saltillo. Saltillo is not actually a big city, but these sidings have been created pretty much to scale. As far as if you took the actual siding length and scaled it down, that is pretty accurate. And the reason I decided to do that is because then we can run nice long coal trains. The EBT ran 20, 30 car trains easily. The largest of the Mikados were actually tested at 60 hoppers, empty hoppers going north. So that could be a sizable train for narrow gauge. So we'll see how much room we actually have here, but the point is that way we could have nice meaty trains. and they meet here. And this little red, this isn't going to be modeled, but that would represent where the Ganister spur goes. So we're not modeling the spur, but we have the interchange track so that those cars can be picked up and dropped off. Now we're not just focusing on the coal. Now we have the Ganister traffic. So not everything is full north to south. You would have some turns picking up Ganister from Saltillo. Now, the Y is the thing that I'm particularly happy about. This makes me happy. So the Y was me thinking, well, okay, what do I want to do? Because this was a hard one to think out. And I thought, okay, well, I don't like the idea of I don't want to do a double-decker layout, especially for Train Z builds. I want to keep it single level. And there's Ys all over the place on the East Broad Tap. In fact, Saltillo on the south end, there is a Y for turning locomotives going back north. So it's like, okay, it makes us have a Y here, but what are we going to actually do? And then it dawned on me, Rocky Ridge. Now, Rocky Ridge isn't a well-known location because, honestly, I think for a lot of folk, if you're not familiar with the railroad, your knowledge of it is pretty much limited to the north end. But Rocky Ridge was halfway between Saltillo and Robertsdale on the south end. It was, there was a mine there, but it was also a junction with one of the East Broadtop branches. So it gives us a scenic excuse to have a Y. We're not modeling that branch, and we're not going to simulate traffic on that branch, but it gives us an excuse to have the Y. It has a double bridge feature, which is going to be really nice. And we're going to be able to model one of the two tunnels on the railroad so that when the train goes in, we're going to kind of simulate what's called Silent Hill Tunnel on the north end. And then the south end is going to look like Rays Hill Tunnel, which comes right out. There's a little depot, and then there's these bridges and the Y. It looks super cool. I'll probably pull up a photo in one of the books and try to show it to you. There might also be a photo on oldeasty.com that we could check out. And then crossing here, we go back into our staging. So this gives you the ability to run trains around in circles. It gives you the ability to run operations with different meeting locations. And I feel like this is going to give us a lot of operating potential. And that was the thing. I struggled. I thought, can I make this smaller? Because I could make it smaller. Model railroad is always about compromises. But as far as a satisfying build, I felt like this, yeah, it's a bit larger as a layout, but it just felt right. White Star, glad you tuned in. So, now let's talk about the shops, and let's talk about this underlying track plan. Because obviously, this is kind of a patchwork of things. And what is it a patchwork from? Well, the inspiration for the shops is a train layout by a man named Donald Shook. Donald Shook modeled the EBT, and his version of the EBT, the most realistic element of it was his Orbisonia shops. He managed to cram the entire shop complex with every single building into roughly a 14-foot lawn space. And about 3 or 4 feet wide total. And so I upscaled it a bit, but what you see is that. So the advantage of it is we have all of the shop buildings in place. Because as we see when we get to the operating session a little bit later, there's a lot you could do even just with a shop complex. We tend to think of railroads, and we tend to think of model railroading in terms of our main lines, maybe a roundhouse, but we don't tend to think of shops. And the EBT, because it was narrow gauge, had to be a self-sustaining railroad. They couldn't just transport their equipment to another railroad, a larger railroad shops, and have them do the maintenance. They had to be able to do it themselves. And so, hence why the shops were built. And this is a great way of looking at what these shops were like. and also how much operating potential it provides to just be moving cars around in here. And yes, the one thing that I've kind of skimped out on is our cold tipple does not have its ramp and adjoining track. That would have taken up too much space, and it wasn't really important to me particularly. So, what do you guys think of this as a track plan? We're going to get started building it now. I think I've given enough lip service to the approach that I've taken. Now, let's actually put it into action. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think of it. Do you like the approach that I've taken with this? I I hope you do, and I'm going to be very interested to see how this works out from a playtest perspective. Always good to be with you guys on a Thursday evening. I'm trying to keep these consistent to Thursday evenings. We do have a new section on the website, greattrainlayouts.com /live, where I'm, as soon as I know what my next stream is going to be, I will post it there so that you guys can expect it. But it is always fun to be joined by you guys. Great thing about building a train layout in Trains 19 is that it is like a game of connect the dots when you have a track plan. So I've imported this track plan using a program called Base Maps, which takes the flat image and makes it into a map that then I can just overlay tracks onto in the sim. Excuse me. T-Crash, you like it? Want to use it for standard gauge short line? It's a nice smaller layout. Good. I'm glad that you like it. That's the thing. Here's another interesting thing about modeling HO and 3 is that you'd think, well, if I'm modeling in narrow gauge, that I could do more with less. That I could actually fit more track, have tighter radius turns. But that's actually not the case. I've heard from folks who own some of the Blackstone models equipment that you still need a minimum radius of 22 inches. And when you factor in that your average locomotive in HO probably can navigate a small locomotive in HO could navigate 18-inch radius curve, maybe even 15. You actually need more space for HON3. And this is where we're going to be eyeballing things a bit, because I did put the plan in here, but as you can see, I didn't draw it out one for one in any rail or any program like that, simply just because I didn't, since this isn't actually being built to real space and I know that there's enough room for anything, I figured that this approach was going to be suitable. So the question is going to be how much scenery we get to today. And we'll see what we get to accomplish. I'm not entirely certain of how much scenery we'll get to. I think, I mean, as you can see, the shops are pretty much complete. It's just going to be a question of, I think that we'll focus on this Rocky Ridge scene here, just because that's something different. Saltillo, too, like, that's not going to be much. That's just going to be a station and some trees. There are some buildings around the crossing here, but I feel like that's going to be me looking at the books and going, okay, let me find a suitable building and place this here. And I'm more interested in showcasing the sort of the geographic elements of it, the landscaping elements of it, and the play elements. Hey, Midland, glad that you could join us. This should be good. T-Crash, you bring up a good point with ON30. So that was another thing I was considering when I was looking at doing an East Broadtop build. So I thought to myself, well, what if I just want to do an ON30 build. After all, Bachmann did come out with their ON30 East Broad Top starter set. We could just do that. And I chose not to because that would make the challenge of fitting things in operationally even greater. Now, ON30 can navigate some really tight curves because a lot of the ON30 stock, especially what Bachmann produces, can navigate 18-inch curves. However, the problem there is now you're working in O scale, so you've jumped almost to twice the size, meaning you need more space for everything. Plus, I couldn't figure out doing EBT as ON30. Would it be super cool? Yes. There are actually brass models in ON3 of East Broad Top Mikados. But besides the fact those are hard to come by and also expense, if you're just talking about the starter set, which includes a tank car and a hopper and a caboose, operationally, I'm not sure what to do with that. Yes, you could turn that into a coal train, but Mikado's going to haul, okay, maybe 5 hoppers, but then it doesn't have the EBT flavor. I might play around with the idea of a 4x8 ON30 build that tries to do the EBT. That might be a good sequel to this as far as like, let's really see how small we could go with the EBT. But as a first build, I just didn't feel like that's the way I wanted to go. Let's get the station in there for Saltillo. And that is going to be placed. And does that have a track piece? No, that does not have a connecting track piece. So we're going to just place that right about here. I am going to open up my book and see if I've got any immediately useful reference photos for Saltillo or not, as far as placement is concerned. But I think we'll just stick it there since we don't have to worry about how it impacts the track arrangement immediately. We're just going to stick it there for the time being because I'm not sure how into Saltillo we'll get. Let's see. And then, okay, we'll need our tunnel scene, and we probably do want to do that sooner rather than later, but I also want to get all the track laid first, and then we'll get track laid, then we'll start in on that rocky ridge. Oh, hi, Steve. Complete newbie at this. Your recent railroad model craftsman article intrigued me. Well, thanks, Steve. Actually, I still have to. I've seen my copy in the stores, so hence why I haven't opened it. But I actually have that right here, and that was my first published piece in any sort of rail press of any kind. So, yes, I don't know if this April edition of Railroad Model Craftsman is still March is still available in stores near you. But if it is, be sure to grab it. But thank you for tuning in tonight. Yeah, this is the ability for train simulators to be able to better inform us as far as builds are concerned is really beneficial. Or for those like me who just don't have a lot of space to work with right now, it's a great way of being able to have it all while having little. I getting to build all these different track plans without having to worry about the fact of, things like money and space. Money, space. What are these luxuries you speak of? Okay. And then we're going to put our switch thereabouts. And then our Y comes to here. Oh, we've got the fateful Smells Like Kenosha playing. Although, given that we're not running any trains at the moment, we should be safe. Derpy Possum, super glad to see more East Coast 30-foot content in the world. Yes, this is a fun thing to explore. And now we're going to move this reference piece over here, which is going to allow us to get the curve radius right. I could use other tools, but I know that this curve radius is going to work because I borrowed it from that Don Shook track plan. And since Don Shook was running the East Broadtop narrow gauge Mikados in HON3, I can have the confidence of knowing that it would work. My goal is that this doesn't matter that this is a train simulator environment. My goal is that this is something that you should be able to go out and build in the space and it would work just like it does in the sim. Okay. Now, how many tracks do we want to give this yard? We have a lot of flexibility with the staging yard. I mean, it is the kind of thing where if you really liked Mount Union, you could make it themed after Mount Union, have the coal processing plant there. If you really liked Robertsdale, you could represent some mines. For simplicity, we're going to make it a boring staging yard. And we're going to make it 4 tracks, just because I think 4 tracks will be enough to store our trains that we want to fit in place. Because really the goal of this is to be able to just have the trains come in and have them go out. Now, food for thought. We're not going to do this for the sim, certainly not for tonight, because it required a little bit of finessing that I don't want to bore you guys with. But food for thought. So our staging as represented is stub end. Meaning, what do you do when you want to reset your trains? Well, in the sim, we could just press a button and the train faces the other way. Yay for us. Not so in real life. There are a couple ways you could go about doing that. You could put a yard ladder to go down to a single switch, and then you have the ability to run around your trains. Actually, what I would do, I've seen this done on a lot of UK, British designs. And this is why I'm not going to finesse it tonight, but I might experiment with it off camera. It's putting a turntable here. So what you do is when your train comes in, you detach your power, bring it onto the turntable, you turn it around, route it for another track, and now you can run around your train, and you're set to go for your next run. Other alternatives, you could close it up. You could have a Y on this end and close it up here. You do you. For me, I'm kind of envisioning as if this was a garage. So I'm almost picturing it like this is where you need to store cars. And so when you're not running the railroad, maybe this whole section of staging slides over to on wheels. I would slide over to your shop complex. Maybe the staging goes off into another room off to the side. There's a lot of ways you could finagle that. That's the part of the beauty of being able to plan this stuff. So you use a software like AnyRail for the sake of being able to make sure that your track geometry is realistic, that you're not having unrealistic type turns, that, oh yeah, we could totally get a Mikado around that. But once you've done that, then the ability to actually play with it in the sim and say, okay, how does this actually space out? How does this look? And most importantly, how does this play? And this is a plan I'm really excited about the play time with, because I think that, I mean, for one thing, is this the first time I've designed a layout on the stream? I think this might be the first custom design that I've done. I've shown a lot of other track plans, but I don't think I've built one on stream yet. So, yay for first time track building. Did I get that right? Something looks funky about that to me. Why does that look funky? There we go. Ooh, yeah. Okay, I know what I want to do with that, though. We're going to undo a few steps to get that right. I'm going to bring that a wee touch of hair back. And move that a little bit over to here. Now we should be able to have, yep, that is what I was looking for. But yeah, never live streams a custom build of his and then decides to make it the East Broadtop where people have strong opinions about things. So I'm prepared for your roasts accordingly. The tramway wasn't your custom. Well, no, thank you. thank you, Casey. You're right. Yes, the tramway was a custom built, so this is number two. Um, so I'm not going into this totally unprepared for roasting. But this is a bigger one than the tramway. This is a larger scope of things. I think that is all our track in place. Let me just turn off the. Oh, did I lay everything to the? I hate when I get my layers confused because now the yard track there has to be alias to the right layer. So for those unfamiliar with Train Z, like Photoshop, you can put track on different. You can put track and buildings on different layers, which is great because then if you're trying, let's say you want to try different configurations of buildings or different configurations of track, it's a very easy way to do side-by-side comparisons. The downside is that when you forget that you've switched layers and you have to re-alias what or reassign the layers because you done screwed up, like I just done, then you run into that. Easy enough fix. At least I caught it now before I constructed half the route and went, oh my goodness, why am I still facing that? Oh, wow, I didn't realize it, but okay. I think now if we turn off the base maps, we can see all our track in place. That looks right. And now we could actually kind of get a better approximation of it. So here is an overview of our track plan. Oh, thank you for the super chat, Timerman765. Can I play Frank again? Well, I can play Frank again if the San Juan Trains guys write another episode and cast me in it. It's their series. So, recap for those who may have just tuned in before I gave the whole overview of what we're doing. This is the East Broad Top and HON3. We've got Mount Union, Robertsdale, represented by a single staging yard. Coming off of that, we got our I keep wanting to say the G. Alwick Creek scene over here. Coming into Orbisonia, where we've got the full East Broad Top shops. Round another curve to Pogue Bridge. Another curve to Saltillo. Another curve through a tunnel to Rocky Ridge. Then back to staging for Robertsdale. So let's do some uber basic scenicking for the shops. Let's talk about the shops. Now's a good time to talk about the shops while I just go in there and have a lot of cinder ballast because we're modeling this in Common Carrier era, which means there be not much in the way of green. Now, in the long run, I'm probably going to add a little bit more range in terms of the types of ballast, just so that it doesn't look too black and boring. Some weeds some places, but this is just to get us covered so we're not staring at grid. And this is a really cool way to actually do kind of a virtual tour of the shops. Oh, I forgot my storehouse buildings. Okay, well, I do have a couple to place, but those are pretty minor. So I'm going to give you a little tour of the shops while also painting the ground texture of the shops and realizing also that I forgot to link up this track over here. Now, in real life, this was the main, and this was this track at the station platform actually came off a spur. But I feel like leaving it that way because it's my railroad. And this is already truncated because what this plan doesn't include, we don't have the yard tracks over here because we're already pretty wide. This is pretty wide, and so my priority was more about being able to get the shop buildings than yard tracks, partially because if you want somewhere to store hoppers, you can store more in staging. We'll throw that switch over here. That seems about right to me. And we'll bring this in here. And close it up about there. And there we go. So yeah, there's a couple missing tracks here, and then it really fans out. Meadow Street crosses here. And Meadow Street has 5 or 6, maybe even 7 different tracks that cross it. It's it is one very messy crossing. Not that street. That is too wide. So over here we've got the station, or the East Broad Top. Now, what's interesting about this? Let's talk about this sign, which was placed in the tourist era. Says Orbisonia Station on it. That sign is lying. It's not original to the railroad, to its common carrier area. It's original to the tourist railroad area. And in fact, in the new tourist area, that sign has been removed because it just wasn't accurate. This side of town isn't Orbisonia. It is Rock Hill Furnace. There's a creek. In fact, actually, it's Alwood Creek that runs right about here. And that separates the town of Orbisonia from the town of Rock Hill. Orbisonia is much larger than Rock Hill. But, yeah. That sign, misleading. We've got our roundhouse, home of the famous EBT Mikados. Want to place a few of them? Sure, let's place a few of them while we're at it. Let's put number 16 in, because we're going to have fun with that later, and we'll just drop 17 in on another track, because why not? 8-stall roundhouse. Brick, because obviously you don't want to store your fire-breathing steam locomotives in a building that can burn down around them. Brick roundhouse. Today, stall 8 has been separated. Actually, during this model isn't quite accurate, because even during the railroad's common carrier days, this stall was separated. Nowadays, it's used as a restoration shop for the railroad. A lot of number 16's work was done in here. So there's actually a wall that divides these two sections. And then tourist area was a lot of storage. Turntable that came from New York Central, I believe. Paint shop, where cars went to be painted. Now the site of one of the passenger cars being restored on the railroad. Now, the East Broad Top shops were built on farmland, and most of these buildings were built for the railroad. This farmhouse is the one exception. This farmhouse predates the railroad. It's believed to have been constructed in the 1790s. True story, there was a Civil War general whose funeral or wake, I believe it was held in this house. So that is, let's see, where's our storehouses? So that's kind of interesting to note that. Oh, yeah. So we've got our storehouses. Right behind the yard office are the storehouses. This is where the railroad would store. Now I have to figure out angle. So the house sits at an angle, but then it kind of creates this awkward angle for the way things go down here. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to make the buildings parallel to the track. Now, the storehouses are where the railroad would store nuts, bolts, rivets, miscellaneous hardware. If they needed it, chances are that it was stored here. And it was connected to the storehouse by these annexes, like so. Though, if you look at a map, you'll see that they're straighter than mine. I have to figure out the angles that I want the buildings, but we're just going to kind of rough it in there like so. These storehouses are an interesting testament to preservation efforts. So they, because they have housed a great deal of very heavy hardware, and this is all farmland, very soft soil, these buildings have been sinking into the ground for decades. And by sinking, I mean they are basically 1.5 feet underground. Now, the Friends of the East Broad Top, nonprofit organization that's long supported whoever owned the railroad. Initially, it was the Kowalczyks when the organization was formed in the 80s, and then now the EBT Foundation have done a lot of work to stabilize buildings. This one we'll talk about in a moment. but now turning their attention to other buildings. And the storehouses have been a major project because that's required emptying them out, categorizing where everything was inside them so that then that could be put back in order. So now if you saw it today, or at least when I saw it a month ago in February of 2023, this storehouse was in pretty good shape. It had been raised up, repainted, looks great. Or was it that one or was it that one? One of these has been restored and the other one is not yet restored. It's a great before and after comparison. This is another Friends of the East Broad Top success. This is the blacksmith shop. If you look at photos of it around 2004-5, you'll notice it is about to sink into the ground. It's sinking into the ground, and it's the leaning tower of blacksmith, in that it is very heavily listing to the from the way we're looking at it, the right. And the Friends came in, jacked the building up, put proper concrete footers under the building, and now it looks great. This is the sort of shop alley, and here we get to go into some of the chronological buildings. So right on the edge here, we have the electrical and brake shop. Then we have the pattern house, where patterns were made for the foundry, which we're going to get to in a second, out of wood. And that, of course, conveniently next to the foundry, where this overhead crane you see could take scrap and lift it into the foundry to be melted down and used for all sorts of parts. In fact, if you were to visit the railroad today, there's a huge scrap pile under this bay here, representing metal that didn't quite make it to the foundry. Ah, the Grand Castle. This is the machine shop, car shop, and boiler house. Let's break this down. Okay, so this is the machine shop here where the EBT did its heavy maintenance work, and basically just kept expanding as time went on and as their resource demands required for the kind of work that they were needing to do. They built 250 hoppers in these shops, fabricated them from scratch. They bought an order. So when they were going from wooden hoppers to steel hoppers, they bought, I think, 30 from Pressed Car. This is where I have to check this book. But they bought them from an outside source. And then they reverse engineered those hoppers to be able to make them in their shop. So they had those originally 30. They figured out how to expand them into 3 bays and eventually 4 bays, extend the tops. And that work was done in these shops. All sorts of really cool machines in here. To this day, you can go see it. Over here, the boiler house, where there are 2 stationary boilers with these gigantic stacks. These things, oh man, I did many a drone flight around these stacks. They are fun to film. And in here, 2 stationary Babcock and Wilcox boilers. And those provided the power to a stationary engine that drove overhead belt and pulleys. Right next to those shops, we've got the car shops over here. So as modeled in the sim, it's just an open space. I can assure you 2 things. Number 1, it ain't this open in real life. Number 2, there ain't no concrete floor. It is dirt floor. Wooden walkways for some parts of the machine shop. So the track layout in this building is right. It just is lacking a ton of internal detail. But this is another time to point out that actually a number of these buildings exist in kit form, and you could get some of them from Banta Model Works. Right now, Banta is selling the foundry and pattern shop. That is one complete kit. In fact, I have that kit here. I have yet to assemble it, obviously, but there it is. But they also just announced the electric and brake shop at the end over here as another kit. And these are buildings where, yes, if you're looking to do the whole Shamil Shamazel, you could do that. But if you're looking to do something completely unrelated to the EBT, Or you've already got your track plan. It's like, but I just want a little piece of EBT. These are good buildings that don't take up a lot of room. Now, previously, I think it was Banta produced the machine shop, car shop here. So this you could get as a kit. I think the Friends of the East Broadtop store, febt.org, their store still has some of these. The carpentry shop has been produced. And I think that's all that's been produced so far. I don't have the full memory of it. Point is that now with this renewed interest in the EBT, more of these buildings are becoming available in kit form. So you could go out and get a kit. And you don't have to dedicate yourself to doing the EBT. You could just choose a building and make it work around what you're doing already. Perfect example of that. This isn't a kit, but actually I was at a fall reunion, which is the annual gathering of the Friends of the East Broadtop. And they were selling off the custom built structures from somebody's train layout. They donated them to auction, and all the funds go to support the Friends. They were selling this. They were selling a bunch of the shop buildings, but this is the one I went after, and I got it. I love the blacksmith shop. It's very front and center when you're walking into the yards like this. So I really wanted that one, and I got it. And it's such a nice building because I don't think I'd ever do a full EBT. But it's a nice building I could tuck in somewhere. All right. So I think that concludes our sort of... last two buildings. Carpentry shop. Not actually for woodworking, but more for the EBT's bridge gang, I've been told. And we'll move that switch down because I'm looking at it and realize, oh, that could be a little tight. Oh, I forgot a building. The sand tower. Let's get that fixed. Let's get that sand house in here. Yep, that should go right about here. There we have it. Now this is looking more like the EBT. And this is why I really didn't want to compromise size-wise on doing tonight's build, because I really wanted to do the shops. Over here, lumber shed. Storage for lumber, for whatever the railroad needed it for. And last but not least, the coal tipple. Now, in real life, the coal tipple was on the side of a hill, so this would be a hill that have a long ramp down because the railroad used its supply of coal to fuel its locomotives. Given the size that we would need for that, we're not going to be modeling that in its full entirety. But we've got the tipple in there, and that's what counts. Kevin Seibert, I see 3 foot. I give like. Good, I'm glad that you like. All right. So what would you guys like to see me do? I could do Saltillo. I could do Pogue. I can do the Rocky Ridge scene. Any preferences? And while you type out those preferences as far as what you'd like to see, because we've still got another hour or so of building, so I think we could probably get through a couple of these scenes. We'll get through all of them as far as some base texturing, but in terms of making them look super nice, definitely want to spend some time on that tunnel scene. That seems like that's going to be a priority. Actually, I should get Old Easty up on another page, because then I can look up what page in the books I need to go to for my Rocky Ridge reference material, because I have a feeling we're going to go for that. So, oldeasty.com, managed by a friend of mine, Chris Coleman, who's had the website up for a very long time. According to the footer, it's been up since 1994. And he's done such a great job of providing a chronological look. There's a complete roster of the railroad, a mile-by-mile look at the line. And, let's see, we're going to go for reference, historical photos, reservations, site info. I think I'm just going to actually Google search East Broadtop Rocky Ridge, because I bet Google will know to take me to a site, and they do. Rocky Ridge Ranch for entry. And let's go there. And enter. Interesting. He's changed some things around since last been in here. Go for Rocky Ridge Station. There we go. And I can find my published photo in 101. Great. So I opened my book to page 101. And yes, we could see if this is the scene. Okay, I should look at your comments first and say, I've seen requests for Rocky Ridge. So let's just go for Rocky Ridge. So here's our first. I'm going to try to hold that up so you can see. Rocky Ridge is a really underestimated location because it's hard to access. You would have to go for a significant hike to see what remains there. It's at the south end of Rays Hill Tunnel, which itself has had a cave-in, so... And obviously, I should stress, it's on railroad property, which is private property, so you should not trespass. But this is going to be a fun scene to recreate because we've got the station, a little section shed. We've got the split. We've got the two bridges that are going to coming off on each location. This is going to be fun, so let's get into it. So first, we're going to lock in our track at 0 so that we're not accidentally changing the height of the track with the height of the land, both up and down. So we're going to just lock all that into place. Make sure none of that shifts on us. And I'm realizing I actually have to connect that track in. And something tells me I need to rearrange my tracks at Saltillo, but I'll figure that out later. Because I think they all came off of this ladder, and then there was a bubble for the third one. Let's do some landscaping. So the south portal, as we could kind of see in the picture, as well as you can see through the webcam. You know what I should... It's only me. I'm just going to increase my photo size, and then you can actually better see it. So let's do take 2 of that. So this is what we're actually looking to do. So we've got the tunnel that's right there, the station that's right there, bridge coming off the side. The train that we see there must be an officer's special because it's the one car, and that one car is the Orbisonia, their number 20 private car. So let's make this scene. So to do that, we need a really, really steep hill. We want this hill to be pronouncedly steep. Because this is a good view block opportunity here. It's also a good backdrop opportunity because I think that we'll probably have sort of a general mountainous backdrop going around the whole way. But if we could have an actual physical mountain here, that's a great backdrop for a scene like this. Even though, yes, it's very close to the roundhouse, where really this would be part of the town. It will work for our needs. And so we'll do it like about yay. Now, obviously, at some point you have walkway out here, but we're not going to worry about that too much as far as where that actually comes into play. I have a feeling I put that too close to the switch, though. I'm going to go knock this hill back a wee bit because we want to make sure we have room for that station. But man, does that look cool. Now, yes, we've put this... The angle at which that's taken, you'd have to use a cell phone. But the goal is that it should still look like a cool scene even from here. Even if the more photogenic scene is on the other side. I'm realizing I should make myself small. And so I'm going to make myself small again. Okay, now you can actually see what I'm doing. Yeah, sorry about that, Harley. Not used to playing around with my screen in that kind of way. So, let us get our Rocky Ridge Station, which I believe I've downloaded, but if not, yep. So we're going to put our bridge, and that bridge is going to go about here, which means I'll have to take the track section out for that, but that's not a big deal. And about there, it'll go down. We'll wait to attach it in once I've got the landscaping done. Maybe? We'll see. Then I could use that map. Because I need to remind... I'm pretty confident that bridge is on this leg of the Y, but I kind of want to make sure of that before I commit to that and then realize that I've done it the wrong way. I believe I have a map in here. If not, I'm sure I have a map in one of the other books. Let's see. There's Ray's. And not seeing the river there. But if one of you EVT geeks knows the answer and I'm screwing something up, please shout at your monitor as loudly as possible and I'll do my best to hear you. I'm going to say the other leg of the bridge is here, going off of memory on that one. So yes, we have our section house over here, and we're going to put that facing the track like so. And if I look at the photo on 101, how close should it be? I would say it should be, yeah, about there. That feels right to me. Now, we are going to be compressing the distance somewhat between this station and the mountain. But honestly, I like my cozy seats. I like seats where things feel a little claustrophobic, a little tight, a little compressed. And this has the right look for me. So I think I might have that backwards. I do. Yes, it should face this way. Yay for book reference. So, if we've learned anything from today, books are your friend. Especially when it comes to researching railroads. Because while the railroad survives, these buildings do not. And so, now we'll need to finish getting that land down to 0. And we're going to need to put a tunnel portal. So, remember when I was talking to you guys last week about... last month about the benefits of 3D modeling and how it's worth getting, you could always pick up a new skill. And I was saying at the time, well, I don't know if I want to get into 3D modeling. I'm not sure. Well, I kind of got into 3D modeling. So, though I don't have to show it, I don't have it yet to show, I do intend to probably build the south portal of Rays Hill Tunnel because there are drawings of that. So, yeah. I kind of got myself into another thing. I have a habit of getting myself into things. Do you guys ever find that to be the case? You get yourselves into things? I certainly find myself getting into things. Mostly good things, I'd like to think. But for the time being, we're going to use a placeholder. A placeholder called Indigo. We're going to use placeholder. And we're going to set that at 0 so we don't see that track. We're basically just using its tunnel for its portals. That way we can put them like so. And now our scene's starting to take shape, but I like the look of that. That looks cool to me. I dig it. Other than that, we're going to need a trestle of some kind. Now, I have to remind myself. I'm going to have to remind myself if... I think that was a steel trestle as well. Questions. So the question becomes, what type of bridge do I want to use for that? And I might end up scratch building that. So in the spirit of matching this design of bridge, we're going to make it from a girder kit, and we're going to use... We're going to use that. It falls into the category of close enough. into the category of I am happy with that. And that way we can make our own custom girder. And I think what we'll end up doing, because this curve is so tight, is we're going to make it about yay big. And we're going to make it, because I don't want to make it multi-part. I want to make it straight, but we're just going to make it a little bit wider so that it can go around part of the curve. Maybe we do make it multi-part. This is where sometimes you have to ask yourself, okay, do I want to build it like they did, or do I want to make it look a bit more aesthetically appealing, even at the cost of realism? And I am certainly not here to tell you do one over the other. I am here to say have fun and do what you are looking to do. We'll do it as a multi-stage bridge, just because that curve is so tight. And here's something to consider as well. So, if you have an intimate knowledge with the railroad you're modeling, it is very easy to get caught up on, oh, I have to do it this way because that's what the railroad did. And sometimes you'll want to, and that's fine. But it's also important to remember that if you had to dig really hard to find that one photo that shows what that one scene looked like, you are probably one of the only people who are going to know whether it's right or wrong. So we could take liberties. That is a thing that we could do. So we're going to have the river. Now, what would be interesting is technically, if we put the bridge over here, then maybe we could use the same river going along here and crossing through there. I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm going to just have the creek kind of come in and go out here. But just an interesting food for thought that sometimes you can have your water features extend along further. So we're going to go for this as a height, because that, we can't quite see the creek bottom here, but that looks good to me. I do actually have the terrain data for the EBT in Train Z, but it's in a different installation of it, so a bit harder to get to. So we're just going to go with this for now as sort of a loose approximation. And then this bridge would pretty much be in the center of the track here, so we're going to get that kind of squared around like here. This is where, because we're compressing things, we have to figure out how to make it look like it makes sense. And that's kind of going to be part of the challenge with this build, is where are we taking liberties, and can we make the liberties not look like liberties, but make it look like it might have actually gone together that way. And at that, we are going to... we'll do that height. And move it over ever so slightly to about there to get it to line up with our track, like so. And then we're going to switch. We're going to split this track here and here, delete, and move to here. There we go. And that's our bridge scene. And truth be told, I might not use that prefab bridge. I might use this just to match it, because it pretty much is the same thing. We can use that as a guide, but in the interest of keeping things moving along tonight, we're going to leave it as is. So, I like that. And so now we get into, okay, I think we need a little bit more hill. This is where it gets tricky as far as blending this in, because I don't, by blending this in, we do sort of rob ourselves of that trackside view as the train comes out of the tunnel to the station. But if we're looking down from the hill, we kind of get that, and that would be the perspective anyway. Thinking about that perspective and how you would actually view the layout, that's part of what I try to approach here, because it's very easy to get caught up in, oh, it's a train sim and we can do what we want. But also important to remember that when you build it in real life, you do have to use your head and actually position your head and your body to view it. Kevin Seibert, hi, RO music in the background. It is, and a big thank you to Mark for allowing me to use it. And speaking of Mark and the East Broad Top, I encourage you, if you haven't already, to check out his/our video on the East Broad Top on his channel. If you Google search East Broad Top and look for Heiss as the username, it's going to be one of the top results. We worked on that over the past month plus, and we're really happy with how it turned out. It's basically a miniature documentary about the EBT, but there's a lot of focus on the people that are involved with that railroad, and that was a really fun video to put together. So if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to check it out, and check out his channel in general, because he's a good person. I work with him to do some of his editing. All good reasons. I don't want to get too caught up on replacing switch stands, but we'll replace a few. Would that be a harp, or would no? These wouldn't be harp switch stands. Another interesting element about the EBT is the types of switches that they used. And that is going to have to be number 8. So, on the main line, they used conventional switches with frogs. And then in their yards, they used harp switches where the rails were just pushed from side to side. Now, Train Z doesn't represent that. We still have, there's no way to really model that in Train, so we've got the conventional switches with frogs here, but take my word for it. Oh, thanks, Midland. I'm glad that you enjoyed that video that we created. That was a real treat to put together. And then I'm going to put, yep, we'll leave that one there. This one, who knows which way is. Oh, actually, I should put main, these should be main lines because there is a main and siding. Or are those main to begin with? Yeah, those are, well, that's main. That's definitely main. And I'm going to say, yep, that is aligned. And since that is yard, I'm going to main, and then main for here. Yeah, because I like them in being along the lines of each other. Keeps it nice and uniform in look. I don't see a switch here in the photo for reference, but we're going to just put one of these guys there because that feels right. And here too, there's no real right answer because one way is going to be correct for the scene. We'll go it that way. And let's do some basic ground textures and trees. I do think this is, in the interest of trying to get through the bulk of scenes, and then I'll be coming back in off screen and then kind of refining these later. We'll go that way. So we're going to add some rock here. After all, this is Rocky Ridge, and what would Rocky Ridge be without, well, rock? So some basic ground coverage to get started with. I want to put some darker stuff. How about that? Yeah, some browns in there, especially on the mountain. This is the Bob Ross portion of our show, where we get to just paint happy little cliffs. Yeah, just little bits of rock in there. Because there's no evidence in the photo. In the photo, there's such heavy tree coverage, you can't really see if there's no exposed rock. We're just kind of growing stuff around it. But that way, there's a little bit of interesting color to it, at least for the purpose of being in the sim. I'm going to get some dirt in there as well. Let's mix that into the fray. That feels right. And then get some rock, especially around areas like these. And especially along the riverbed. That feels like that should be fairly rocky. I do want some darker grass. Although I feel like I always do darker grass. I'm kind of trying to avoid always going for the same colors. But I just like how it's looking because I really want this to something about having those dark colors that adds that sense of tightness and claustrophobia, and I really want that with this scene. What do we do here? Well, this is going to be backdrop, so it's kind of going to segue into that anyway, but for the sake of making it make sense with this, just add a little bit of hills. That looks right to me. And then what's going to be interesting is how we transition this scene into the adjacent Ogwick scene where you're doing this jump from where the railroad's climbing through the Appalachian Mountains down to mellow farmland. Thank you again for the super chat, Timer Man. You should fix the tunnel issue. You can see the hill in... You can see hill in the tunnel. Well, so this tunnel doesn't have a dig hole. And actually, I'll show you what I like to do in this sim, because I don't like dig holes for tunnels because they're too restricted. You have to align them at a certain spot in the grid. So instead, I just like to do this and make sort of an artificial shadow with this fascia. Because I find that way, then I get to place the tunnels where I want to place the tunnels. And it looks right. I'm happy with that. So, now that'll be less distracting. Now let's get that cinder ballast in there. And some trees. And then we can move on to another scene. Either we can move on to the west end north end of the tunnel, or we can move on to Ogwick. Here too, I'm gonna make this would be, Rocky Ridge is really nestled within the, I'd boot it up, but then I'd have to switch streams, so, but I think it would be cool. Let us, okay, we're gonna take a field trip. We're going to take a field trip, which is to say we're going to switch into Trains a New Era. So you could actually see what that landscape looks like. Because I haven't imported the terrain into Trains 19 yet. So I have to get Tane up and running. So, because if we go into Tane, you're going to actually be able to see the geography of it. So this part of the route doesn't have any scenery, but it'll give you a sense of what the landscape looks like around it. And that could be a good indicator of things. So, we're going to fire up Tane, and then I'm going to need to add an input source for it. And the frame rates will probably be choppy because I'm running two sims at once. But let us add... Oh, and sorry about the... Give it a minute as the sound... subsides. We're going to go to East Broad Top. And we're going to go here. So, while that loads... Oh, and I realize it's also making me really choppy, so sorry about that. Let me add... This might not work as well as I hoped it would. Oh, but I know what I could be doing here. I know what I could be doing. That's going to be a lot easier. So, give me a moment. We're going to export the route, and I'm going to re-import it from here. So, while I'm getting that together, I'm going to put the question out to you guys. Have you been to the East Broad Top? What's your most recent trip? Share some East Broad Top memories in the comment section or in the live chat. This should only take a minute because it's worth bringing this up because being able to see the geography of the railroad is definitely beneficial for being able to, let's see, 27th of March. Let's see, 3rd of August, 27th. Okay, that's the activity. So, export to CDP. And sure, let's go into there. And then we're going to load it into the sim. So I'm going to switch to the full dem version of the route. So stay tuned here on Great Train Layouts Live. And welcome back to my content manager. But at least now I know I'm doing. So I'm just going to bring up the window. Welcome back to Great Train Layouts Live. And I can show you what I am seeing. Let's check it out. So this is Trains a New Era, so that's why it looks different and a lot less robust. But this will be a good chance for us to talk about the lay of the land of the East Broad Top. As far as the geography is concerned, as you can see, this is very heavily a work in progress. But it does give us the track, it gives us the landscape, and it gives us some recognizable scenes. We'll actually start with one of the ones that we have coming up, which is Saltillo Station here. So we can see that we've got this little spur coming off. This is the Narco branch where the Ganister Quarry was up on the hill. So the track kept going this way up the hill to Quarry thereabouts. But we're not modeling that full thing anyway. But that way you can see you have tracks for trains to meet. You also have tracks for those cars to be stored until they would be hauled north to Mount Union. And this also gives me a chance to see how I need to modify my switch configuration when we get back into Trains 19. We see this Y that we have here. So we aren't modeling the Y, but we can use Rocky Ridge as a Y for turning trains back north. Going a little bit further south, one of the other scenes that we've got, and this one I actually did do a little bit of scenicking with. This is going to be our entrance into Sidling Hill Tunnel, although we're doing an amalgamation of Sidling Hill and Rays as one tunnel, because that's what we've got room for. But it makes sense because we've got this curve leading into this tunnel. So this is one of the scenes we're going to be doing. So an interesting geographic element to notice that we're going to have the once the track curves from Saltillo, need to make it seem like it falls off into this hillside before we go into the tunnel. Next up on the location tour, this is Rocky Ridge, and I was right about where the bridges go, so yay for me being right about bridge location. But this gives you a sense of how tight things were. So we have our tunnel portal, the station, the section house, and then it splits off into the Y. So you can see how this is really why there aren't a lot of photos of it in any era, because it is really nestled into the mountain. Now, I kind of like this feature of how the mountain sort of converges, but because we're not going to be looking at the layout from this perspective, that becomes less important. All that matters is that you have a sense when you're looking at the Y that we go into the scene, that the mountains kind of border it. And also you can see here how this really blocks our view of this leg of the Y. And that's going to be, rather than this tipple, this is going to be Ogwick. And I'll show you what that looks like in this version of the sim in just a moment. Going then further south, what is this location? This is Cook Station, thank you. So Cook Station, which is the last place before Robertsdale on the south end with all of its mines. So, just for context, you've seen it in layout form. This is it in its full-sized form, Orbsonia. So you can see we have a lot more yard tracks to play with than what we're going to be doing in our layout. But if we were to try to... This is one of the cool things about having a real full-scale version of the sim is we can measure how large this would be. And we could see that if we change the scale of that by going to edit root, and we change that from real scale to HO, that if we were going to fit that scene into HO scale, it would be 5.7 feet wide there. And if you're talking about the full width of, let's just say, even the yard tracks before you get to the freight, yeah, 5.3 feet wide, which means you're getting into switches in the center that are not accessible, and that just does not feel... That does not feel like a good idea. The other scene that we're going to be including is going to be Ogwick Viaduct. And we can see how different that's going to be scenically from from the south end. So our goal is to make this area, which is super flat and super calm, meld with the super hilly area that is uh, the super hilly area that is Rocky Ridge and the Appalachian Mountains. So back into Trains 19, we are going to go. Thank you for bearing with me as I switch between programs. Let's see, and then double click on that. Midland, have you, did I see the grant news today? I have not seen any grant news, so I'm not familiar with this news of which you speak. While I'm experiencing this transitional point between simulators, I should also point out that this is a good time to promote Patreon. Patreon.com/The Roundhouse, where you can support things like the Roundhouse podcast, Great Train Layouts Live, and for you Trainsy enthusiasts out there, you will be happy to know that the latest offering, as in what you could experience before anybody else can, is the Valley City Street in Interurban. That was one of our live builds from last year. So if you go to patreon.com/surroundus for as little as $1 a month, you're going to support what we do here on the show, and you're getting access to a really cool little interurban switching layout, and get to try that before anybody else does. I have to find which program I'm switching to, because there's a million different GRS19 traffic. I'll make it simple by closing out a couple of these. And that should make my life a little bit easier. And setting to, there we go. And now I can close out of Tane. And we'll be back in TRS-19. Once I have closed out of Tane. Once I close out of Tane, he says, hopefully. As my computer freaks out because I'm running two high-intense graphics card sims at the same time. Well, while we're waiting for Windows to figure out what to do, it's going to be a little staticky for the time being, so sorry about that. But now, with that in mind, we know what we're doing. So while we're waiting for things to reboot... and we close out of that. And that should improve things. It wants to figure out whether or not I want to save that route. Don't save. There we go. Okay, back to the good old days. So, trees are the name of the game now. Kind of a mixture of deciduous and pine. I've actually seen a lot of these Sosna trees in that area. We'll definitely get some of them into the mix too. Quite a few of these trees, especially ones that have very long trunks and not a lot of growth on the bottom of those super long trunks. Those are in the 100 range, so we'll add some of those. Oh, those are small ones. Do some of those, but looking for the big, tall ones. Still looking for the big, tall ones. There we go. Some of these guys are what I'm after. So some of these, and then we'll do some. Yeah. Yeah, I like how those look. Very flowery, very expansive. We'll do some of the Yazans as well. I like them. We'll kind of add them into the mix. And some of them. And we really want to that sense of growth and claustrophobia, although I'm having too many of the same trees, so What other ones do I want to build into the mix? Not us. Some of the case, yeah, some of these guys. I'm really trying to get that sense of balancing. Yeah. There we go. Getting there. Like so. Do I like these? Nah, not really. Probably gonna go with more Sosnas. Or the dubs. Oh yeah, the dubs are actually really nice. Some of them are really big. But helps to give our mountain a sense of scale and being really tall. I'm gonna leave that be for the time being. Because I'd like to move on to Ogwick and transitioning between this, oh my gosh, we have these big mountains, to, hey, some flat farmland and the like. So, as we saw from Trains a New Era, the thing with Ogwick is that it's kind of up on a berm, which makes it additionally difficult. And you look at photos of it too, and it very much has this feeling of it is kind of, it's almost as if the bridge is a pedestal. And so then you're having to figure out, okay, how do I get that sense of it's on a pedestal right next to the railroad is kind of buried in the mountains. And that's going to be what we need to figure out. I think the answer to that is to just have a notable hill here. So we use that hill as our transitional point. Even though there's more of a berm that the track is on, if we really emphasize this hill a lot, almost as a view block, that way enough of a hill is going to prevent us from seeing Ogwick Bridge if we're looking for him here. Because I really want this part of the Y to feel like you are in Rocky Ridge. Even though it's briefly in the wrong geographic location, I still want it to feel like Rocky Ridge. And that looks good to me. I do like that. So we're going to go with that. And then that way here, I mean, yes, if you're looking down it, you're going to see Rocky Ridge. And there's just no way around that. But the goal is that if we're here, I shouldn't be paying attention to Rocky Ridge. And I think we could do that with some trees. Especially some of these Yazans. A couple of them. Like so. And that way, you have that additional sense of separation. This scene feels nice and contained. I'll even bring those down into the scene a little bit more. Maybe grab some of those Sosnas while we're at it. Especially these ones, because they come in pre-grouped clumps, which is really convenient. Yeah. I like how that looks. And then maybe a little closer into the track. And not floating above the ground would be good. Yeah, that looks right to me. And then that way, by the time we're here, we can really emphasize this as farmland. So I think I'm tempted to make this part of the scene, but I just want to do it as basic trees and such. I don't want to get too involved with it. So let's get our terrain painted up. Oh, that's a soil base. Well, I guess we could do a soil base and then... No, I want to do that city dirt. I never understood why they called it city dirt as a texture name, because it is mostly grass. But you have a lot of interesting names for assets in Trainsy. And we just roll with that, because that's what we do. Icer. Will I be showing how to do dual gauge? Well, actually, no, because on this layout, Mount Union isn't going to be dual gauged. It just doesn't make sense for this particular build to do it that way because it's a staging yard. So there's not going to be any scenery. It's just where trains originate and terminate. If you were modeling Mount Union for the sake of actually showing off, well, certainly showing off your ability to build dual gauge track, because congratulations for achieving that level of merit if you could do that. But also just having that as an operation, that'd be one thing. But here, this is just focused on getting trains in and out of the scene. So, there we go. And then, let's see if I can find a backdrop. Oh, those IDS forests might be nice here. Because I'm going to refine this later, but I just want to have a nice backdrop to reference for now, so it's like not just boring. For the sake of play. Again, something that we will refine off camera. But that gives you a sense of what we're looking at. Oh, wait. I think I have some mountain ones backdrop that might actually look okay in this context. Let's see. I mean, these are nice, but they're not mountainous. Back. Model trains. Yeah, that works. We'll go with that. It's maybe those mountains are a bit big, but they're certainly what we're going for. So we'll just lower that a bit so that they're not so gigantic. That seems about right to me as a height. Too low. Let's go -30 on that. That seems a little bit better. Yep. Good enough as a placeholder. Gives an impression of what we're going for. It might have one that I like. Oh, I like that one better. Okay, let's just do a replacement of that. So we are going to bulk replace. One of the great tools in Train Z is the ability to bulk replace assets. So we could just take this backdrop and say when it grabs the right thing. So yeah, I want you to grab the model railroad backdrop. I'm going to replace it with this model railroad backdrop. And there we go. Okay, there we go. That gives you a sense of what we're going for. Actually, that really gives you a sense of what we're going for. Now, it's not quite the right backdrop for this section of layout, but if you're close, it works. And last thing I'm going to do to these areas, because I really want to get on to just doing some general refinements for Saltillo and Pogue, is we're going to drop in some river splines. Because we need some water in the creek. And do I like that? Yep, I like that. So I'm going to raise that up to about that height. And we're going to apply that height here and here, so that we actually have a creek for Ogwick Creek. Although I think I need a wider riverbed. We'll go with a 50 meter. Bit dirtier than what I'm going for. We'll go with the 100. That works for me. And apply that height there and there. And we'll just refine those edges a little so it looks more like a river and less like a pond. And then I'm going to lower all this area around it so that we can have a better viewing angle, so it doesn't look like we're looking into some sort of basin. Obviously, this is all going to be fascia and not visible, but just for the sake of presentation. now we've got a proper Ogwick Creek, and we can definitely make the most of that when it comes to trees and so forth. So I'm thinking we might. Yeah, let's see. Let's just keep going on this. I want to get the trees placed just so it looks a little nicer and a little bit more polished. And again, placing some trees here so we've got something to transition the background. Because that's true even if your model raritying is. If you have the ability to place some items that are going to ease between your foreground and background, that is always a good idea. And some of the Yasins. But that looks increasingly respectable. And I'm pretty happy with how those two scenes are separated. This, just having this little hill has given us the ability to really give a sense of distance between... Man, I'm so long to process words tonight. I don't know what it is, guys. Between Alwick and Rocky Ridge. So that's going to be the east end of our scenicking bit. I might do that bit later. But that at least gives us something to work off of. Now, it's interesting to consider for this scene here. So how do I envision this? I picture this as a really thin, removable section. Or duck under. But it pretty skinny. Don't want it wide. So we're just going to have a little bit of trees lining the sides. Just enough so that there's a sense of separation, especially so you're not looking at Orbisoni and going, oh, there's Rocky Ridge. So just a couple of well-placed trees, and then we're going to paint the ground about the width that this removable section would be to about here. And we'll get our cinder ballast in place, do some dirt and some other things along that line. Now, in the real world, north of the station is actually another creek crossing, and that creek is Blacklog Creek. Bridge over that. So it's not entirely unrealistic to have a bridge north of there. It's just that that bridge doesn't curve off directly to the side. But honestly, I like how that looks. I like how it looks to look down the station, and we don't obviously see the bridges and all the Rocky Ridge stuff going on, but we can then go over here, and now we're in that scene. Oh, I should add this spline to that as well. So we're gonna get that river, and we're gonna apply it here from about yay to yay. And then we're going to get the height. Oh, we already did. We're going to apply that height, so I'm going to have to raise it up a little bit more than the black log. Which is okay, so about there. We'll get that height and apply that height. And we're going to try to have the river disappear this way, and then we could put some trees there to make it a little less apparent how it's actually disappearing from the layout. Something along those lines seems good. I mean, it's not going to be possible to completely hide it, but we could at least make it a little less obvious by way of having some trees there. And like that way, it's kind of disappearing along our field of view anyway. And how do I want to do this? Backdrop's kind of hanging out a little bit too high for my taste. I'm going to grab this at 0. Being able to do the landscape is probably one of the best elements of pre-visualization that you can treat yourself to with Train Z, because without it, you can do drawings and such, but it's so nice to be able to play with perspective and terrain and just see, okay, how big do I want to make this hill? How small do I want to make it? Just gives a lot more flexibility so that when you're actually pouring the plaster and you want to get it right the first time, you have a better sense that this is actually what I'm going for. So I think that's good. We'll add some more later, do super detailing with some more trees that are going to give a sense of brush. That'd actually be some Kush stuff, which we could drop a little bit of that in here for now. Because why not? So what are you guys thinking about the build so far? I know that we've still got a ways to go. Is this something that you want me to revisit? So obviously there's a lot of super detailing to be done. The question is, do you want me to next month? We've got a special stream, so next month is booked. But would you want me to come back to the EBT and say May, or do you want me to keep cycling it? Because I don't want to be repetitive on what I cover here. So let me know if you'd rather see something. Well, you'll definitely be getting something new for April. But let me know if you'd like to see something new for May. What are we getting for April? Well, April is going to be a treat. We're going to be modeling the Iowa Interstate's Milan branch as it is in 2002. What's neat about this build is that it's a commissioned build by the layout designer, Scott Thornton. And Scott's going to be joining me on Great Train Layouts Live. So Scott is going to be seeing his pre-visualization come before him as you join me and provide feedback and all that kind of thing. So that is going to be at the end of April. In fact, that one I can tell you the date. That's going to be the very last Thursday in April, which is going to be the 27th at 7. So tune in April 27th, 7 for a modern day industrial branch themed off of the Iowa Interstate. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to leave that for what it is. Maybe we'll put some bushes just to give a little bit of sense of growth. And like so, and then we'll have another bush like that and a bush like this. Yeah, I like that. Actually, I'm going to put this bush over here because then that provides further view block. My goal is that this part of this section, it's either a really small duck under or it's really thin, less than a foot, because it doesn't need to be super wide. Let's get some rocks in there and some vary up our ground texture. I'm not sure how wide that's going to be once we actually do scenery, but we'll see. This, I think let's see about some houses. Just a few houses. Gonna need super detailing eventually, but just for the sake of having some houses that are not company houses. Houses on Meadow Street are nice houses. House. Not that type. Yep, these ones. Something like, oh. Yeah, this is a bit bigger than anything that's on Meadow Street, but it's the right look. It actually kind of looks like the Iron Rail. So we're going to leave that house there because I like it. And we'll put the adjacent street down there. And yeah, we're really roughing it in right now, but at least it gives you a sense of where we're moving. Brendan Granger, this will earn a seal of approval for sure. Well, thank you very much, Brendan. I appreciate that. Okay, and there too, like just having even just a single house, because I sort of imagine you've got this duck under here. It should be about 2 feet wide. In fact, let's measure that. Let's be precise. So from the station to the Rocky Ridge, yeah, perfect. We're looking at, if we zoom in on that, 2.1 feet. That, to me, is perfect. So I envision this as a duck under. I envision it as no more than a foot wide. So if we measure from here to, oh, not cameras. We use our ruler to measure from here to here. Yep, foot wide. That's a reasonable duck under. Or a removable section. Okay, this I'm going to call good for now because, yes, there's lots of super detailing we could do as far as people walking around the scenes and so forth. Maybe we'll add a bit of stone just to vary. Oh, wait, I saw a thing. I saw a thing that I liked. What is that thing? Yes. There we go. that's a way of providing some visual highlights, so it's not all just a kind of boring black, flat black. We want a little bit of contrast, especially in areas like this where there's just otherwise not any contrast whatsoever. So there we have it. Orbisone shops. Man, am I glad we got those out of the way off camera. Let's do a little bit of landscape around this, because it does look like it's going to topple over, and in real life it might. I've almost been thinking about doing some custom 3D work to get it to look right, but I haven't, to make some, because Train Z, one of its shortcomings, and the developers know it because they're working to fix it for Surveyor 2, is the fact that your landscape resolution is really not great. So it's really hard to do sun and grain transitions and the like. Actually, I know what I'm going to do. Rather than doing this out of land, I'm going to use a CL cliff for this. Or not CL cliff. CL. There we go. Embankment. I think the embankments are too wide. But the rock path, rock face with grass. There we go. That's what I wanted. Because then we can put that along here. And yeah, you wouldn't see the rock. I don't like that bright green though. Wow, that isn't what I was going for. I want to do a slightly... Yes, let's do this one instead. So, again, something I'm probably going to refine off camera, but we'll at least then have something in game that looks better than nothing. And we'll kind of have it go off this way. Now, this is going to be interesting. So, we're able to see the layout like this. So I kind of want something of a hill that leads up to the coaling tipple, just so that it has some transition. And we'll paint it. Interesting. Not PBR though. I prefer my PBR textures. Let's use that soil forest floor as our base around here, and then we'll do highlights in other colors, which will include the city dirt. And actually, yeah, do I even line that with city dirt or what? I'm going to do it for the sake of it looks nice for the time being. In real, off camera, that's probably going to get just lined right next to the fascia, like track fascia. Because I really want you to feel like you're in the scene, and the more gap there is, the less we're going to be able to create that illusion. We need to move the tracks in. That they kind of have a weird curve to them at the moment, so we're going to put that here and here, and I like that. Yep, that looks right to me. And then some trees. Actually, there's a couple of really tall dub trees that I think are going to be good for this. Give a part tree, part vine, overgrowth kind of look. Now, Common Carrier, this wasn't actually that. This is what's interesting about modeling the EBT, is that Common Carrier era, there was a lot more, things were a lot more open. But all of the photos, everything you see of the EBT is, well, unless you're looking at historical photos, it's at least tourist era, if not later. So it looks overgrown. And so for me, even where things might have not been as overgrown, I know the EBT is an overgrown thing. So I want, like for me, I want the trees, I want the cold tipple to be grassy and overgrown. There's a really good... Pete Laro, the artist, did... The guy who does the prints of various railroad scenes, a lot of them being northeast. He did a series of 5 centering around the East Broad Top, and I'm a geek. I have all of them. They're really nice scenes, and he did one at the coal tipple, and there's so much grass and overgrowth, and I love that feeling. So even where it wouldn't have been this overgrown in this era, I just want that. I want that in my. This is my East Broad Top. That's what I wanted. This. You do you. So we're gonna replicate that on this side, which is going to be a matter of grabbing that spline. And, have to continue it from this way. Which, yeah, I think we'll go like this, and then we'll kind of... So it would be hill, and it would kind of go down from there. So I want to somewhat recreate that feeling of it is a hill, and then it goes down. I don't want it to stay rock wall the entire time. So we'll... Oh, I didn't switch to height. Because even though we're not having the track along the hill, I do want to replicate that feeling of as if the hill leads up to it. Yep, I'm happy with that. And then this is all just going to be trees. Because a lot of the EBT is just train going through woods. And that's what we're going to do here. Now, Pogue's actually another scene where if you look at Common Carrier era photos of it, it's up on a pedestal. And I think we do a little bit of that transition by way of having trees along that back edge, and then by the time it gets to the curve, we put it on an embankment, so when it's crossing the bridge, it is on that pedestal fully. And that, it'll be plenty distanced from the Orbisonia shops to recreate that feeling. So, now we're using this as our... No, I want to use the... I'm liking this forest floor texture, so this is going to be our scenic base. This part is pretty thin as far as the depth of scenery. It does not need to be thick because it's just forest. We'll fill in that corner because Train Z likes to work in squares, not curves. So that's going to be our base. And we're going to use some of the city dirt mixed in there. Especially here, actually. We might go a little thicker on it here because we're transitioning from forest to embankment. Gonna need to find a good backdrop. Need a good farmland backdrop that comes. So once it emerges from the forest, that we're coming into the farmland. Oh, cheers, Teo. Thank you for watching. But this is a... Yeah, this is a good railroad. There's so much you could learn about the EBT. About what a railroad was like. Because how many railroads have that much of themselves left to show? Percentage-wise. Because, yeah, you could say, well, it has the advantage of being small. And it does, but there are a lot of small railroads that don't have anything left of them. And so the fact that we are gifted... privileged to have as much of the EBT as we do is such a wonderful treat. And there's so much that we can learn from its archives about how it ran, about how it maintained its fleet, its communications with locomotive builders. The archives are nothing short of amazing. There is so much information that we have yet to learn about this railroad, and it's just beginning to tell some of these stories. And so we learn things about the EBT in so many different ways. I mean, we learn from research, we learn from visits, we learn from talking to people, and I'd like to think we learn from model railroading and train simulations as well. I think that goes a long way to informing us about... Because there's what you learn from actually conducting the research, and then there's so much that you learn from when you're trying to recreate that vibe, and you're trying to get to recreate the character of a place. So, book recommendation time. I just finished The Virginian Railway by H. Reed. It is one of the best railroad histories I've ever read. And the reason for that is because it really captures, it's well researched, there's technical information, but it captures the feeling of Appalachia really, really well. I love it because it makes me feel like I'm back in time with these people and they're telling me their stories. And it doesn't just feel like a cold, calculated, removed sort of, here was this railroad and here's what it did. And it's no longer with us, which is kind of the typical trajectory of a lot of railroad histories as they're written. So the ones that stand out are those that do something different, and this one absolutely does. So this is really going to be treed in, and actually I might go ahead and just drop in a forest backdrop, because though it makes it harder to see from this angle, I would also say this is not the angle to view it at. It's not really built for that. This is built for this whole layout. I would say, yes, you can enjoy you have to enjoy Aldwych on this side. And Rocky Ridge, you could watch this way. And the shops, it's sort of both sides. But here, this is the viewing angle. That's part of the fun challenge. Oh, hello, Luca. Part of the fun challenge of trying to get the shops encapsulated. And it'd be interesting to challenge oneself to say, well, if you didn't have this much space, what would you do? And I think you could do it. It'd just be a matter of figuring out what buildings functionally matter most from an operation standpoint, or that matter to you scenically. Steve Berry, rookie question, if you don't mind. Where would one go to download all the EBT structures? That's a good question. So, TrainZ comes with a program called Content Manager. It's built into the game. And that Content Manager gives you access to literally hundreds of thousands of locomotives, freight cars, passenger cars, routes, buildings, etc. So you go into Content Manager and search EBT, and all of these structures you see are available there. That said, once this route becomes publicly available, all you have to do is download the route from greattrainlayouts.com. And then in the Content Manager, you go to the route, it'll say missing dependencies, and you click download, and it will automatically download all the missing files. So it would download all these buildings automatically. But yeah, if you want to play around on your own Content Manager and search EBT. I am really happy as I'm watching this unfold. I don't know about you guys, but this is making me happy. Let's use another dub tree. One of these guys, because this is making me happy, because it's taking me to my happy place. The EBT is very much a happy place for me. I love going there, and I love the feeling of it. There is a special quality to it. If you've been there, you know it. If you've been there a lot, you really know it. And especially during the dormant era. I got to first know it in 2016. So I would go attend Friends of the East Broad Top work weekends, which you can still do. And you should join the friends at febt.org. But at the end of a day's work, and just taking in the atmosphere of the yard when nobody else was around, boy, that was a feeling. As much as we try to give it words and explain why it's special, and it is, nothing's ever going to fully encapsulate how special it is. I mean, even with the film that I did with Heiss, and I encourage you to check it out, because I think we did a pretty darn good job. But even that, it's just, there's so much that you can say about the place and never have said enough. I'm going to try using a spline embankment for this, because I really want that track to stand out. And as discussed previously, getting the track to go up on the embankment just the right way. Easier said than done. Yes, we'll use this. That looks right. It doesn't quite match the textures, but honestly, off camera, I'm probably going to reskin a version of this that does match the cinder ballast. So we're going to match the height to the track. And get that height, and we're going to apply that height to all of the spline points so that it looks good. Like so. Maybe a bit too wide. Where's that CL embankment? See, the CL embankment isn't wide enough. Again, I might end up 3D. Like, this is... what? Might work. Let's try that. Okay, we're going to do bulk replace of this spline with this spline. Now, it's not going to look right because I'm going to have to figure out what the new height is. But if this height works, then I could just... or if the width works, then I probably can just apply it to the track. Or apply it to the track. I can apply my texture to it and get it to look good. Little skinny. Though I do like how it looks. We'll leave it for now. Oh, I think it might work if I just try to get the spline points to line up more with where the rail points are. Because that's actually not too bad. That looks... yeah. Looks good enough for now. So that way we get that nice feeling of landscape rolling away. Because Pogue was really wide out in the open in Common Carrier era. Now this is gonna be a farmland background eventually, but we don't have that, so we're just gonna extend the background we already have, like so. So and you can see how much difference the backdrop makes. Maybe we'll leave that open for now. We'll leave that open and figure it out later. Because that might be me actually making a custom backdrop for it, as I am sometimes apt to do. Pogue itself. Tall. In a word. And of course, that's going to upset the height of the bridge, so we're going to need to fix that. And we're also going to want to make sure that we fix the track at the right height so that it doesn't totally get screwed up. Doing pretty good. So we're cutting our playtime a bit shorter, but as you can see, there's so much we could do playtime wise with this, but we could also, we'll be able to get in a couple runs and do some light switching. And we're gonna need to raise that bridge up just to see, because, oh yeah, we're gonna need to make that much lower. Sometimes I wish there was with Trainsy, I wish there was a way to sort of set an object height in the same way you could set the track height to be, it is going to be this high, period. I wish that you could do that with objects so that despite modifying the terrain height, you didn't then all of a sudden change your object height. I'm going to lower this part of the terrain down just so that we can have kind of a proper viewing stage with all of this stuff. And then we're going to raise that bridge back up. And it should look like that. That might be too tall, but we could go backwards more easily. Actually, no, I'm going to keep it at that height because I can just play around with the water height. Doesn't really matter what height the track is at. That looks properly epic. Because I think that Pogue is sort of as epic as landscape or architecture gets on the EBT. You could make a case for Ogwick, but Pogue is taller, so it just has a little bit more of a robust look about it. Um, yeah, I like that a lot. So we're just gonna finesse that height down because that looks better. Yeah, that looks about right. And we're going to lower the terrain around it so that it doesn't seem so much like it's in a kind of, what's the word? Like it's in a canyon. I don't want it to have a canyon feel. It just needs to feel elevated. Yep, I'm liking how that looks a lot. That looks pretty good. And we can kind of finesse that so we see the girders exposed because we've got the abutments built in on this one, which is always nice when we have that as a feature. And that looks good. And then this part of Pogue Bridge, there's actually a road that goes underneath, which I don't know that I'm going to get to that. That feels like a detail that might have to wait for another stream. But we will at least get... We'll get the landscape in there. Maybe I'll put a road and kind of rough it in, just so that we've got something to play with. But that's... yeah, that's looking right to me. And we're going to make our backdrop a little bit lower on this front. Yeah, I feel like I need to make a... There's not a lot of good... There's good forest backdrops, but there aren't a lot of good farmland backdrops that are easily available in Train Z. So I feel like that's probably something I'm going to end up taking and making myself just so that I have it. Because this should really all be farmland. Right now it's just going to be grid. But that's good. I might do a little bit. I don't know if I want to get into lowering all that. It's not really supposed to be seen from that way. It's good from that way. I'm happy. Okay, let's get some grass in there. And then we're going to do some lighter grass mixed in for contrast. And then we're going to do... well, we're not going to do cinder ballast for the bridge. What we are going to do is river. Because there's a river through here. Or creek. Guess this would technically be a creek. So, in the interest of what I think is a reasonable width, that seems reasonable. And then I'm going to get just the height of it. Oh, right, this is super wide. We might actually go with 50 on this. Let's go with the 50-meter water. I like that water texture. And now just to figure out what we need to do to make it seem about right. Yeah, that seems about right to me. At some point I could look what the actual height of the bridge is and then make sure it's right in this scene. But we'll worry about that later. Meanwhile, we'll get the... Now, making the river disappear here is going to be a little tricky, but not too hard. We're going to have it curve off to the side this way so that it appears to disappear behind this hill. It actually goes the other way in real life, but for the sake of what we need to do here, this will work. Yeah, like that. That looks good to me. And then we're going to raise this section up. I'm not sure how far out the fascia comes or how far out the scenery comes, but I wanted to... This I might actually go deep on. Because you figure this is the kind of scene where you're not going to need to reach your rolling stock. So it could be a little set a little further back, especially if you want to force your audience to be farther away from the train. And so we'll lower this because we don't want this to feel like it's in a canyon. So it needs to kind of gently go down to the right level. And then raise this up so that it comes to the right level. And then that knob looks a bit out of place, so we'll lower that. And we'll raise that little divot. And that's probably good enough as far as roughing it is concerned. Like about there. Add some soil. And I'm tempted to put trees, but I actually think what we probably really just need to do is smooth out the hills a bit more. Going into our grid mode to try to make it a little less spiky. And another way we could do that, we could try to say this is our median tension, our median height. And we'll just gently get things smooth to that height. It's a good way of kind of evening things out, taking away the spikes. That looks good. And this here too. It's like, well, would there have been any trees around there? Because right now Pogue is very treed in. But it's kind of nice to have an open area. So I'm going to leave that the way it is for now. Millennial Modeler. As you know, I've never been to EBT and even cracked jokes of the past for all its narrow gaugedness. However, this episode has really given me a new appreciation of the charm of this live. Well, thank you. I'm glad it has. It is charming. Honestly, you go see it in real life, it feels like a model railroad in real life. The fact that you have all these buildings that are still in place, it feels very model railroad friendly. And it very much has its own character and personality. Yeah, that might be tighter than 22, but our Mikados will make it as close enough. Because I want to make sure we have some playtime. And we are getting to 9:30 already. So that is going to be that for track alignment. And I think we've connected yeah, we've got that connected. So this is going to be a night. We're just going to tree this in. There's a lot of between Saltillo and Pogue. I was going to say Three Springs because that too, of just running through forest. And I feel like we need a just nice, plain, in the forest kind of scene. Nothing fancy, just a scene divider that is very representative of what you would see a lot of in that part of the landscape. Some dirt. We're going to go dark colors on this. Maybe a little bit of highlights just to add some interest. The tracks are going to be raised by a bit, but not a ton. But yeah, this has been a fun build. This is going to be a fun one even to super detail more. I'm happy with that. Yep. And then we'll cinder ballast it, and then we will tree it, and then we'll do Saltillo. And Saltillo, to be honestly, kind of a lot of the same as far as this little section here. It's just mainly the backdrop. Yeah, I like how we're getting the separation between scenes and being able to show these different sides of the railroad. A lot of times when people think of the EBT, they think of the tourist era 4 miles that extend north out of Orbisonia. And those are nice, but honestly, the south end, which is what the railroad is in the process of rebuilding to, is nicer. It is more scenic. You're out in the middle of nowhere more. You have these cute little towns that you pass through, and it's just very pretty. Do I want that as a full backdrop, or... Yeah, we'll just do full backdrop because we're going to be using it for this side anyway. And that's going to... Actually, we're going to need to continue it through there. We can always make our scene deeper. So the south end is underrated by the casual fan because people don't typically drive the south end, but it's worth exploring because there's a lot. Even, I mean, again, don't trespass on their property, but there's quite a bit that you could see even just going to Pogue. Pogue you can very easily access from public roadways to see the bridge. Saltillo Station isn't there, although there are plans to rebuild or build a replica because the original was very heavily documented. So this is where you may do something different than from what I'm doing. And what do I mean by that? Well, so I've chosen to include Saltillo, and as I explained earlier in the stream, my reason for doing so is because I want the Narco Spur. Which reminds me, actually, I have to insert that in there. Even though we're not going to model it by much, let's still see where that is. I put it right about there. So there is our Narco Spur. And that's all there is. Sometimes you don't need a lot of space, because obviously we're not going to fit a ton of cars on that. We're not going to fit any. But it doesn't need to. The point is it represents. So you might say to yourself, or you might be saying to me, Nick, Saltillo, is it like, this is just kind of trees and stuff? And yes, it is. But A, sometimes it's nice to just have trees and stuff. And B, you could always do it differently. You might say that you want to have another scene. So you could do 3 springs, or you could do some of the areas where the track ran by the creek, which is very pretty. And that'd certainly be one way of doing things. It all depends on what your goals are. And that's why it's worth knowing your prototype, doing your research, and just experimenting with different ideas to figure out what is going to be the most satisfying. For me, that satisfaction derives from the idea of having a decent amount of operations packed in. Get my passing trains. Get a source of Ganister. True story. Saltillo, I believe it has a lot of marshland around it. And there were the remains of a woolly mammoth that were discovered in that area. I think it's part of the Smithsonian now, if I'm not mistaken. So, but I like that. Like, yes, it's not the most diverse, but to have a scene where you can see the entirety of the train against a wooded backdrop, that makes me happy. That suits my needs. At the end of the day, it's all about suiting your needs. It's what are you looking for? It's gonna... Oh yeah, some Yasin trees would be good. So I'm not gonna do full bore detail on this. You get the picture. There's more detailing to be done around Saltillo. Still want to have playtime, and we are coming up on 9:30. So let's just finish off the ground textures. Let's get them looking a little nicer, a little bit more Need this. Oil ground. Yep, that's the one. So playtime, I think what we're going to do, we're going to do a full trip around. We'll try to arrange a meet with another train just to have something to look forward to visually. And then maybe we'll do a little bit of switching. Or actually, I suppose maybe I should grab some power, put on some hoppers, take them south, and then do a north run. I like that. Because then we can appreciate the shops. I see this as pretty thin scenically when it comes to being able to do where the fascia is going to go. I don't see this as a very deep scene. And the reason for that being is because there's just not that much to it. It also saves you from having to make a bunch of trees and so forth. And then this is going to be... Now this is where it's interesting because we do want to be able to see as it goes in, but I also want to give that sense that this mountain doesn't just pop out of nowhere. One of the sort of model railroading cliches I see a lot of, and apologies if you do this, if it makes you happy, so be it. I see a lot of layouts where 90% of the layout's flat, and then there's that one mountain in the corner. And I suppose we're kind of doing that, but I don't want it to feel like we're doing that. I want it to feel like that mountain sort of naturally originates. And some of that is just by camouflaging it with trees and being able to have a decent transition into that scene. At least that's the way I look at it. You might look at it like, Nick, you're doing exactly what you said you hate. And maybe that's true. But I can live with it. So, I'm going to call that GFN. I'm going to call that good for now. Because, yes, there's a lot more scenic work to do. But this, I feel like what we've done today, and hopefully you would agree with that, is that we've got the base elements that we need in there scenically. Yes, there's a lot of... my cinder ballast. I should finish that up. There's plenty of refinement and improvement to be done as far as making it look good. We're going to be adding our walls and fascia and making it look like an actual model railroad. All of these are good things to look forward to for the future. But what I feel like we've accomplished tonight is being able to take the East Broadtop and explore the different ways in which you can shrink it down. And what we see here is a good approximation of what the scenery is going to be. It gives us the big, broad gestures of this is what we're going for. Hey, swirly trains. This is the big... And it looks... I think, to me, it looks like a layout. That's what makes me happy, is that it looks like a layout. It looks like a feasible layout. I'm happy with that. Do I want to put some more backdrops in just super quickly? I might. Yeah, let's drop those in there because we can. And then we'll get our scene staged. Nope, that's not the right one. I need... There we go. Let's start from here, run it back to... So that way we have a backdrop, which I think does make a difference as far as the immersion factor is concerned. When I was building my last layout, I never got around to building the backdrop, but I do think that it felt like a limitation. It felt like something's missing here. Something's not right. Okay, that's a decent enough... Yep, there we go. Now that way when we're driving it, we have a backdrop, which that feels right to me. Do I want to just temporarily take this and make it all flat? Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think it looks any worse. And obviously, a lot of refinement to do, but Yep, I'm happy with that. Okay, time to set up our trains. Time to save our layout. Ugh, I'm never as conscientious about this step as I should be. Okay, so what do we want to have going on here? Well, we've got 16 and 17 in the shops. Let's set up 18 with a train. Something. 18 and 18 tender. And some EBT hoppers. As you can see, we've got a lot of them. We've got a lot of different variations and types for the ease of convenience and time. I'm just going to put a bunch of the same for this guy because that saves us time, especially when it comes to loading. Now, the EBT did own cabooses, but the crews frequently liked having a combine on the end, or at least a coach. And so that's what we're replicating with this coach here. This we are going to represent as a... Let's see, what did I say I wanted to do? So we're going to pick up some... Do I want to pick up some Ganister with that? What do I want to do? Yeah, I want to haul a loaded train south, and then we'll figure out where to go from there. So, some... Fortunately, these hoppers, which are available from Jointed Rail, come with some weathering and different skins, so they don't all look absolutely identical. Put Coach 9 on the end of this train to have some variety. And actually, this is a great way of testing our siding capacity, just to see. So we should run at least... Oh, let's hope that we can at least run a 30-car train. That seems... right. Oh, that switch somehow seems to have been mislocated, so I need to run that. We definitely don't want it going that way, so... Let's see what we've got lengthwise. So... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2... 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30. 30-car hopper train, that seems pretty respectable to me. Should we run that light to get empties? Well, let's see what we have space-wise over here. So, that 30-car train that we had at Saltillo. Oh, I need to change that switch. That switch is set for the wrong way. No wonder I can't properly stage it. Can we fit 30 cars here? You can pass 2 trains with 30 cars? Not quite. Capacity on this end is a little bit lower. So, for having the coal cars waiting here, that's a bit much. But, maybe we should just go empty and pick up our train empty, and then we'll run it south. That way we don't have to worry about that. But we will... Other thing I'm going to do, just so we can have a little bit of interactivity, is I'm going to put a track marker, let's see, on the siding here. Until 1. Just because that way, then, when I want to represent us having our meet with the loaded train, we can do so by having it come into the scene rather than having it already there. And then this switch needs to move here. That one needs to be deleted. Okay. And with that, so we're going to... Actually, we'll put our... Well, it'll be easier if we do it that way. And then we're going to load these cars up. And then we're going to play. Cool. Okay. So going up to Mount Union could also kind of essentially represent if we were... so if we had our yard tracks to the side, could kind of be a stand-in for that. And let's see, we need switch. Something is funky here. And I have a feeling it's layers related. Ah, yes it is. Because all the switch stands are attached to the base map. Because of course they are. Just delete the base map. We don't need that anymore, and that's going to be easier than trying to sort things out from the two. Okay, and then we'll delete the extra switch stands here, here, and here. Get our track straightened out. Much better. And then want to make sure the switches are generally lined the right way, just because if we know anything, it's that it's very easy to forget to line switches the right way. And those are all lined the ways that they should be. That switch is irrelevant. And with that, I would say now is the time to get to playing. Hi, Midwestern person. Glad that you could join us. And here we go. So we just, probably save that just in case something funky happens while we're playing. And now, off to the races we go. And we'll take 16 out, because 16 is the one that the East Broad Top just recently restored. Now, yes, my dig hole, my turntable pit is very full. That will be fixed eventually. But in the meantime, we can appreciate this model of 16 as it goes around. And we'll take it to... Now, I didn't put the water column on here yet. So we're just going to kind of pretend that the water column is here. Oh, one more spot. But this is what I love about the EBT, is that this is a model railroad scene, and yet I could be standing here and see that exact scene in real life. Another neat thing about the EBT is these harp switch stands, which activate the... push the rails. So these are cell phone views, shall we say. And what I love is about the real one, too, is there's just so many nooks, so many different small places in which you could appreciate the locomotive as they go through the shops. It is really a fun scene. Rudy Garbley says, I thought I was going to log back in and see a big boy running on the EVT. You're on the wrong channel for big boys in weird places, unfortunately. Alright. So now, continuing on our way. Shall we go out the north end or the south end? And we'll go out the north end. Just because then we could appreciate the engine going in front of the blacksmith shop. This, to me, is a classic EBT scene. Just the front of the shops is an absolute favorite of mine. There's a photo that I've taken, which actually I have hanging in my kitchen. And it's available for purchase on streamlinermedia.com. Because I don't advertise the fact that I also have photo prints available for sale. I do too many things. But on streamlinermedia.com, I have a store where I sell a bunch of my prints. And there's one of the shops, and there was water pooled up on the ground from pretty much this angle. This, to me, is classic EBT right here. Okay, so now taking the actual sort of, if this were a model railroad approach, our train would probably look like this in HO scale, thereabouts. If we were standing at, normal person height. HO N3 is tiny. It's a bit bigger than N, but it does take getting used to. Okay, so we are going to make sure all our switches are aligned and that we are set to come in for the empty tracks. Coming back through Rocky Ridge. Can take a moment to appreciate that scene. Honestly, I'm really glad that we went with Rocky Ridge as our Y. I think it's just so pretty. I'm not concerned about the fact that the geography's off. This just feels pretty. Oh, and what's this? I've learned that one of my cars is bad ordered, and we should set it out at the shops. So we'll set that out on our way south. Coupled up to our train. So we're hauling empty south. And now we'll get underway. I like having 4 tracks because then you figure you have enough room for 3 long trains plus a runaround if you ended up doing the turntable at the south end. So I'm going to say this 5th hopper out here. We're going to set it aside, and then when we come north, we're going to switch it in the shops. And see, what I like about this scene is that even... Let's pause before we lose the locomotive. Well, we almost lost it. But you still get a nice view as the train is going around this curve. Now we're coming into town. Want to make sure we're lined for the main. Man, a lot of people waiting for the train today. This makes me happy. I'm really glad I went for this. Somebody earlier asked, I've seen the question come up a few times, is there ever going to be an EBT, a full EBT in the train simulator? And my answer to that is I hope someday there is. I don't know that it's me building it. I don't know what that looks like, but it would be really nice to see a full EBT happen. But for me, a lot of how I get my kicks is by doing these kind of intermediate projects. Which is to say, doing things that are just getting a slice of it. Because this may not be the full EBT, but my hope is that somebody could kind of drive this and that it scratches the itch. I mean, yes, I did build the Whiz Beach and Upwell and never say never, but I am cautious about the scope that would be required of taking on a full-size thing. Part of what I'm waiting to see, too, is we need some updated models. These hopper cars are nice, but these steam engines, I think the model is at least 15 years old. And I'd like to see, and there's not a lot of other freight cars, there's not a lot of coaches, so I'd like to see more content available. I know K&L Trains is planning to make an EBT pack eventually, so I'd really like to see that or something like that happen before I committed to such a project. Because even if I am getting into 3D modeling, that's a lot of work. Gotta clear that switch. So we're just gonna stick it in this rip track for now, and then later we can grab it and shove it in the car shop. But, oh, I'm happy with how this scene turned out. This is a nice scene. And this is actually something you could appreciate from a sort of looking down perspective, because this is supposed to be open, walkable space. So I like that that's visible in that particular angle. Nick from Vegas, this will be fun to run when it's available on the DLS. Well, actually, it will be, but it's going to be available on greattrainlayouts.com. And then that's where all of the freeware streamed builds end up. And I'd encourage you to go there now. In fact, the layout that we played with last time, that Norfolk and Western in the 50s, that's now available on greattrainlayouts.com. So if you love Winston Link photography, you should go to greattrainlayouts.com and download that route. It's available for free. No P-cups. We're not getting anything out. This is... We're switching by way of cutting off one car. Nothing's happened. Nothing is going to happen. Which is another nice change of pace about this route, is that is there switching opportunity? Are there switching opportunities? Yes. I mean, I think that's a real big part of the draw of having the shops, is what good are the shops if you're not going to use them. So it's nice to be able to, you could switch dead locomotives into the engine shop here to be worked on. You could switch cars in and out of the car shop. But it's nice to be able to just have mainline. I just want to run my train in a circle, or I want to have two trains running in a circle and constantly kind of passing them by each other. A lot of different ways you could go about it. So, on our way. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting this finished off, because this is going to look really nice once it's got the final spit and polish on it. So let us take in Pogue. We'll take it in from the non-visible side, because why not? I like this angle personally. Let me make sure my switches are set the right way. Oh, good, they are. And I'm going to set that one. Oh. That is screenshot material right there. Like, that feels right and proper. And if we pause that to have a look from the other side, like, this is a good scene. I mean, that's with a nearly, what? 30-car hopper train. You get this nice wide vista of it. Really making the most of the space. And then going back into the wooded area. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And we need to get ready for a meet, which means we also have to get our train that's meeting us on the way. So we're going to pause to give a little bit of time for them to show up. And we're going to tell them that they need to drive to... track mark Saltillo 1. So they're going to do that. And then we're going to get back to our train. We'll slow down because obviously we're going to beat them here for the meet. This makes me happy. I'm really happy with how this plan turned out. It just, this feels like a good way of using the space. But there's plenty of ways you could compress it. Obviously, the Saltillo scene, you could shorten the siding super easily. The shops would be tough. And I think that, honestly, you just have to pick what buildings you care about and just compress them in terms of size, which ones you choose, and the functionality of each. So we're coming up here for our meet. Oh, I forgot. He's coming in at 40 miles an hour because I didn't set the speed limit. So he's coming in very fast. A little too fast, but okay. Doing some spicy speeds there. Making up for lost time, I guess you could say. While we're waiting for him to clear, though, another opportunity to thank today's sponsor, Bantam Model Works, which I encourage you to check out their website and see all of the laser kits they have available, including the East Broad Top shop buildings. And their current offerings include the Pattern and Foundry buildings, which I have the box for back here. I very much look forward to putting together at some point. And they just announced the electrical building. So I encourage you to check out their website and thank them very much for sponsoring this episode. And now we'll get underway. And we're going to tell him to drive, and we'll just have to manually make sure that he's routed to where he needs to go. Because he's not going to know, so we're just going to put him into the right spot. So this is us departing Saltillo. Oop. Disappearing into Sidling Hill Tunnel and then coming out of Ray's Tunnel. This is a scene I've been looking forward to very much, and that is... oop. Want to make sure our switches are set the right way, though. They are. Our Rocky Ridge scene. Which would, if we're going off of how you'd actually see it, would be enjoyed somewhat like this. But let's go for that photo, since we saw that earlier. This is the photo perspective of Rocky Ridge. And now let's appreciate it from the perspective of an actual person. I like that scene. I'm really, really super happy with how that scene turned out. Gonna look great with some grasses and some bushes. We're gonna go to town on the super detailing on this. But I honestly, as excited as I am about the shops, this I thought it was going to be good, but that's the benefit of pre-visualization, is knowing, being able to actually bring it to life and see it. And if you two feel like pre-visualization would help you to realize your vision and help overcome creative block with your train layout, I do commissions. GreatTrainLayouts.com. And I encourage you to look at some of the work that I've done already besides what you've seen on the live streams, because I'd love to help you bring your train layout vision to reality. And we can do it live and get feedback from the audience, as you've seen today. Cold and steel rail videos. If it was my layout, I would probably put mine in that corner right after the bridge. Not sure what you mean, your what, but okay. This guy seems a little stuck. We'll get him underway. And here's another reason, now that we see our train coming into the staging, now you can see another reason why I felt it best to make Mount Union and Robertsdale the same staging. It's because now you've got this long line of empty hoppers that have made it to the end of the line. Now, if these were two separate locations, you'd have to move the cars back by way of a sort of restaging session in between op sessions, or you'd have to unload them or load them. But by having a shared staging, all we need to do is take the engine off, move it to the turn it, move it to the front, and take that the combine off, passenger car in this case, and move it to the back, and now you've got another southbound empty run. So, I feel like doing... Oh, good. It's moving underway. So, while it is coming in, what do I feel like doing now? Well, I feel like since we can cheat and load coal cars really easily, we're just going to do that. So we're going to flip our train, and we're going to load up our hoppers, and then we're going to go north. And I think what we're going to do... So we're going to end on a little bit of shop switching, just for the sake of having that fun. Meanwhile, we can watch as this train very spicily passes through Orbisonia. And it is slowing down because that switch is not aligned for it. So I've now thrown that switch, and now it is going to speed back up. And I also want to make sure it doesn't come on the same track that I'm on. So you see, operationally, you can actually have a lot going on, because the EBT at the end of the day was a coal conveyor. Yes, they hauled other forms of freight, but they were a coal conveyor. So to be able to just replicate that constant shuttle of coal, you could keep having train after train after train going north to south. Plenty of ways to mix it up. You can throw in the M1, which I could show you the M1, but the M1 that exists for Train Z falls under the category of Mom, I want an M1. Mom, we have an M1 at home. East Broad Top M1 at home looks like this. I mean, ish, but ish. So, and the sounds are ish. So, I think in the future, actually, when I was last there, I made a point of recording the sounds, so I do at some point want to get those into Train Z, partially because what I am working on in my 3D modeling stage of creative life is a Brill motor car. So I'm going to use the M1 sounds for a different Brill motor car. So our coal train has arrived in Mountain Union. So now we are cleared to depart Robertsdale to head north to, you guessed it, Mount Union. There's just really something satisfying about watching these trains go around this design. I'm I'm patting myself on the back, forgive me, but I'm really happy with how this looks. Coming across Alwick. And I have to make sure, nope, I'm not lined for the right way. Of course I'm not. Okay, fast forward button. Rewind button. Fast forward button. There we go. And now, I think this scene definitely lends itself to these northbounds because that looks good. That makes me happy. Well, I suppose I should put some canister cars for us to pick up. We'll get those on the way back. Or I'll place them in the yard once we make our stop. Because why not? And then here we are coming into Saltillo. That's a thumbnail right there. I'm glad you think so. I'll take some thumbnails, but I'm going to wait until more of it looks done. But I'm really happy with this. Honestly, I feel like now that I've built it in the sim, I feel like if I was ever going to try to do the EBT, and I just don't know that I would because boy, does that feel daunting. Even with the amount of kits that are out there. Unfortunately, there are an increasing number of kits available. Saltillo Station's available. An increasing amount of the shop buildings are available. So is feasible if I had a garage big enough to do it. Still feels intimidating. Not sure I'd go for it. But this feels like the way that I would go for it because it doesn't feel daunting. I don't have to get into doing dual gauge track. I don't have to get into doing complex scratch builds like the mines. This feels really attainable because once you get beyond the shops and all those kind of funky structures, I think there's even a kit of the station available. I mean, you're talking these, which that is not a hard scratch build. Even if you scratch built this, even if you've never scratch built something before in your life, I bet you could make that. And other than that, it's a lot of trees. It feels doable as a layout. Something that's not going to take you 20 years to say, I did the EBT. Okay, we're going to put some rock cars, which means we have to look up the EBT rock hoppers. Because there's actually specific ones labeled as EBT rock hopper. I'm going to put 6 there, just to be reasonable. Go into the loads, and we've got our canister. And I like how it works operationally, because you get to have 2 different meeting locations. I suppose technically 3. If you had a northbound going, and you wanted another northbound following it, you could have one train waiting here while the other one goes north. So you have 3 meeting locations for trains. I mean, it really lends itself to a lot. Steve says, as one who will never have space for a model railroad, you have absolutely convinced me that this is the way to go. I think you answered all my questions, and that's it. Well, I'm glad to have answered your questions, Steve. At the end of the day, I think that this is a great complement to model railroading because even if you have a layout and you spend time with it and you love it, I think that there's a lot of creativity that you could explore with a sim because you're not limited by budget, you're not limited by space. And heck, even you could take your pre-existing layout, even if you've built your layout, you could take it, make it in the sim, and maybe you're contemplating rebuilding sections of it. So you test out new ideas with that. Great way of being able to try different ideas. I feel like this happens every time I do a build. Because now I'm playing this, I'm going, man, I kind of want this in real life now. Oh, this would really be nice in real life. I mean, part of the advantage with this, too, is that, I mean, yes, you could go and try to collect Gotta Catch 'em All with the EBT Hallmark models. Um, but you could also just get one. Like, if you got one steam locomotive, you're not going to be able to have meets, admittedly. Unless you got maybe one of the M1 rail car. So get two and you can have meets. And I don't think you need more than that. Like, yes, you can have more. You can put them in the roundhouse. You could probably even get away with running 3 trains at a time, depending on what you're doing. But this is the type of railroad that if you're just running it on your own, I don't think you're going to feel alone. And that's something that I've increasingly become mindful of when I think of layouts that I build in the sim, because the train sim is only a single player experience. And I think about it as well for what I would actually build is I want something that can accommodate multiple people if I have the ability to do a multiplayer session. But I also want something that can accommodate just me and that I'm not feeling like I'm really alone if there's no other trains that I'm meeting. And that's key. I mean, there's some layouts that I've seen that I love how complex they are. I love how they come alive in a multiplayer session. But I wouldn't want to own it because if I was the only one playing with it, I'd feel like, you know, if especially some double track main lines and you don't have a single meet there, it can feel kind of empty. Something like this, especially, I think the more that you're containing your layout to individual scenes, the more it feels like you're in your own world, regardless of whether you're there or you're waiting for another train to meet you. Coal and steel railroad videos. Right there where you're switching is where I would put a mine, right at the end of the passage siding. Okay. You could. I mean, again, there was... So, Three Springs... well, there used to... Okay, before the branch up to the Narcoa Quarry, where we picked up this canister from off layout, there was a tipple that was along the EBT main line near Three Springs. If you wanted to, you could pretend that that tipple still exists. I mean, the trick with fitting a mine in here is you don't have a lot of room. Now, granted, you could throw a switch and have a little bit more room if you put it that way. For me, I like having the space. But that is certainly one way you could take it. John Rizzo, I have an extensive HO and N collection, not much room to run them at all. Yep, that's a challenge. I find that's where I'm at right now. I mean, I've got my Greenfield Village behind me, but I have a lot of Canadian Pacific stock that it's not going to fit around 12-inch radius curves. Let me make sure before I go further that I am lined the right way, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring this in on the siding. That is probably going to be too long, but that's okay, because all we're going to do, we're going to bring it on the siding, and then I'm going to bring this car into the shops, and we're going to call it a day. Or night. Or whatever time it is you're watching this. Oh, but did I line the switch for the siding? That is a good question. Yes, I did. Okay, I was at least thinking that much ahead. Now to make sure that the other switch is lined. There we go. Just in case I need that. I mean, that makes me happy. Would I be willing to share those hoppers or where I got them? Yes, they are available on jointedrail.com. Just search EBT and I think they'll come up. Buddy of mine out in Chilcote did them, and they are available for purchase, and the proceeds go to the Friends of the East Broadtop. So definitely worth getting your hands on. A nice feature about these hoppers too is they have handbrakes on them, meaning that you can gravity switch them. So when I was building that, so the full scale EBT that I showed you earlier in the stream, when I was building that, the Mount Union yard is on a grave, and in real life, they did switch the cars by gravity when they were unloading them, and so you could do that in the sim, and it is cool. I am working on a train layout, not recently, but I have started a train layout track plan that for HO scale that does involve gravity switching. I'm building it off stream because it's kind of tricky to get the grades and so forth to work right, but that'll definitely be a future play session layout. Okay, so our train's definitely going to be too long to actually fit in this siding. So maybe we'll just take it all the way. We'll take it all the way to Mount Union. We'll bring the engine back. We'll do our switching. Simple as that. So again, the sort of spectator position, which if you've been to the EBT, you've probably seen something like this, especially if you were at the Winter Spectacular. And then we're going to go through the Rocky Ridge scene, which this scene makes me happy. Honestly, I hope even if you aren't modeling the EBT, this is a good, I'd like to think that this is a good short line that you could do for your own basement. You could do the shops, you could do something else in place of the shops, but I feel like this is a solid way of being able to get a good amount of operations in a medium-sized space. I mean, I don't know if I'd call 14 by 22 small, but if you were modeling, if you weren't trying to get the entirety of the shops, you could easily compress that 22-foot length to be shorter. Yeah. Now that I see it at this stage, I'm thinking, oh man, now I just want to go to town and really get the thing done off stream. So I think we're going to probably... I think this one is going to be done for the sake of streaming. I'm going to be working off stream on it and then get it up for release, hopefully in a couple of months. Be able to share that with you guys because I don't think it should take too long. A lot of just trees and micro detailing. Yes, I forgot the great costume whistle, but it's called being the narrator. And there were no cars or no people, so I have no issue with how I didn't blow the whistle for that grade crossing. Partially, too, because I haven't upgraded this whistle. And so I don't love the sound of it. Alright, fast forward button means that we have brought the steam locomotive in. And now we're going to, in the interest of expediency, just move it. And we're going to turn it around for the return trip. Ignore those giant X's. They are not relevant to anything. So we'll... But now you can see, and I do think off stream I am going to put a turntable there just so that we can... So that there's a built-in way to be able to do what I'm doing right now, which is just turning the locomotive around. Maybe we'll grab that way car and take that with us. There we go. Because truth be told, that if you had a turntable in the end, you could then take the way car with you back to the turntable and then assemble your train that way. So you never actually have to lift any of the cars or locomotives off the table at all. Darn it, I'm going to talk myself into getting one of those Hallmark brass models. And those things are not cheap. As if I needed to talk myself into doing an EBT layout. Ugh. Don't worry, next week we'll tune in, we'll be building the Milan branch, and then I'll be all about the Iowa Interstate. Okay. No. Those cars did not derail, they were removed from the world. There's a difference. John Risa, Robert Todd has a nice size HA layout in his basement. Des Moines Transfer Railway, I think it is. Nice. Okay, so now we've got our way car, so we're running light. Back to Orbisonia. Oh, let me make sure my switches are set before I do anything else. We're going to set the switch for the main there, and those are all set. Good. Now back to our regularly scheduled view. And then Rocky Ridge, because I can't get enough of Rocky Ridge. Yeah, I actually like the outside of the curve better. That's a better view. So Andrew, as far as squeezing HON3 into an ed scale space, not really, because those HON3 models, because they're brass, they like wider radius curves. So you're not going to get the same, you're not going to be able to do, you're not going to be able to fit it in that tight a spot. Is it double gauge route? I'm not sure what you're asking is double gauge. The staging is only narrow gauge. You could make it dual gauge, but you're not going to, given that there wasn't any dual gauge beyond Mount Union, there's not really much purpose to that. Okay. But this makes me happy. So we're just going to get that hopper tucked into the car shops, and then we're going to call it a night. Oh, I suppose I should show the coal tipple working. That would be kind of cool, wouldn't it? We'll get coupled up to the hopper, and then I'll show that off. Or maybe we'll end by the tipple. Get the hopper in, end by the tipple. Because that does seem like a good place to end the stream. So, feedback. What did you think of this build, guys? Did you learn something from it? Did you just love basking in the EBT, which, honestly, for me, is a big reason I do anything EBTs, because it's just such a great place to be and a good thing to enjoy. Yeah, we'll go by the lumber shed. Why not? That's a nice view. And just because I don't feel like having to stick the pasture car elsewhere, we're just going to stick it in with the car, with the hopper as well for the time being. Oops, wrong coupler. Need to get that recoupled. And... oh. And then, there we go. Right coupler this time. To the coal tipple. And we'll go for the model railroad view on this return trip. And make sure we're lined for the coal tipple. Jimmy Lambert. Hey, Jimmy. Looks like I pulled into the stream running on time. Yes, you could say that. John Overman, I popped in and out, but I think it's a good example of compression that could happen between a model railroad. Thanks, John. And coal and steel. Nice layout, love it. You should end putting on the roundhouse like they would have. Putting it in the roundhouse. Okay, okay. If you're not getting bored of me, we'll put it in the roundhouse. If you are getting bored of me, thanks for tuning in anyway. Appreciate you joining the stream. But yeah, we'll fill it up with coal. We'll take it back to the roundhouse. Good deal. Oh, didn't quite clear the switch. I have to set the trigger radiuses on those. Evening, Odin. Glad you could join us. Jimmy Lambert, East Broad Top, a place where that has every T crossed and every I dotted. No way, E lined and B looped and... nah. Something like that. You got the right idea. Here we are coming in for our refueling at the tipple. Which, what's so nifty about the coal tipple today is that shelter was disappeared off the top of it for a good long while. But it's being rebuilt, and now the tipple is housing the fire suppression system. There we go. We didn't need much coal, so we got what we needed, and now we can go to the roundhouse. Get our switches lined that way. Actually, well, no, I want to take the alley. I like the alley. Let's see if this thing has a... well, it's got a default cab view, so not really that great. But we're going backwards, so we can appreciate the view over the tender, and that's better. And, yep, all our switches are lined to get us where we need to go. Odin, that reminds me, gotta ask Steve Eller about what he's got going on with the EVT. I don't think he started that set yet. I think he's working on other projects right now. I certainly look forward very much to what he's working on that set. Ah, this is a nice view. Hello, sir. Excuse me. So yeah, coming down through the alley. So this is the super small GoPro view. Oh, I need to... Yeah, I need to make sure that switch was on. But we'll do the model railroad view now. What you would actually see. But honestly, the model railroad view is not half bad either. What's so nice, what's so neat about the shops, and again, this is just how the shops are, is all the nooks and crannies and ways you could view them, and how you use buildings as foreground and background material. Although in this case, it's just the way it is in real life. Now we'll get that turned around. I'll just get that going. Ignoring the completely filled in turntable pit. Yeah. I'm happy with that. And I hope you guys are too. As I say, give it a few months and some time for me to do super detailing and the like, and you'll be able to download it too from greattrainlayouts.com. Although, as I say, if you want early access to my creations, I encourage you to go to patreon.com/theroundhouse, where right now you can download the Valley City Street and Interurban, which we live streamed last year, and enjoy that interurban switching route. And since we are back at the shops, one last... we have the smoke jackets in here, so I could even kind of get it lined up. I don't think it's far enough in, though. Don't think the position's quite right on that, but close enough. Yeah, we'll pull in a little more. And there we go. Now we can get the door shut. So one last shout out to today's sponsor, Bantam Model Works. Right now on their site, you can get the Foundry that you see here. The Foundry actually comes with the pattern house, so that is a complete kit that you can buy. They've just released the electric brake shop as a separate kit, so you can buy that too. Previously, they've done, and you can find these buildings on the FEBT, Friends of the East Broadtop Company store, the car shop, the carpentry shop, and the storehouses. So, thank you to Bantam Model Works for sponsoring today's live stream. Thank you guys for tuning in. One last overview of the layout. This is the East Broadtop as designed by yours truly, with Mount Union / Robertsdale staging, Orbisonia Shop Complex, Saltillo, Rocky Ridge Y, and Agua Creek. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you being along for the ride. And if you'd like to download my creations, go to greattrainlayouts.com to see what we have there. Bunch of different layouts, and ever increasing as I get more of my projects that are 99% to 100% and released. I encourage you to go to greattrainlayouts.com, including if you should want to commission me to help make your train layout a reality. Luca thinks it's a good idea, and so all you have to do is go to greattrainlayouts.com and contact me, and I'd be more than happy to help bring your vision to reality. Next month, our next stream is April 27th of 2023. And we're going to be building the Milan branch. It is a commission, and the person who commissioned it is going to be joining us. So our first guest on the show. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more exciting builds on Great Train Layouts Live.